Hello and welcome back to my channel What If Deku 2.0. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today, we're kicking off part 6 of our series, What If Deku Had Godlike Power Surpassing All? If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is DripBayless from FanfictionNet. All the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. The walk from the train station to Ketsubutsu Academy was a little nerve-wracking for Izuku, though he couldn't quite pinpoint why. Maybe it was the idea of entering a rival hero school for his internship. Or perhaps it was the prospect of getting one-on-one training with an actual pro that wasn't either retired or related to him in some capacity. The size of the school as he approached could have also been a contributing factor, although it wasn't as massive as US campus. Even so, he was as excited as he was trepidatious, and that excitement grew even more when he spotted the form of Miss Joke waiting outside of the gates of the school building for him. Midoriya, came the enthusiastic greeting of the brightly smiling pro-hero. The first thing Izuku noticed, beyond her absolutely jubilant disposition, was the prominent musculature of her arms. She definitely did not miss a day in the gym. "I'm glad you chose me to intern with. Eraser told me a lot about you when he saw that you picked me. You know that you're his favorite, right?" she said with her bright grin. "Really?" Izuku questioned with surprise. "We don't really interact much outside of homeroom or when he's occasionally present for heroics classes." "He won't ever admit it," she laughed, "but he wouldn't gush about anyone nearly as much as he did about you. He said you're the closest thing to a completed project that any first year could be." Izuku had to imagine that the gushing being described was just a couple of dry remarks about him being ahead of his classmates and a heads up about his readiness. "I take it that you two know each other," Izuku commented. "Our agencies were near each other," she animatedly explained. "As young heroes trying to make a difference in the world, our mutual love bloomed." Standing in the PE field while Shinso was stretching for the week of hell that the boy was unknowingly about to endure, Aizawa's face crinkled as if he could sense that something was wrong with the world. "What kind of lies is she filling that boy's head with?" Aizawa muttered. Shinso looked up at his trainer for the week. "Nothing, let's get started." Joke led her intern into the building and towards one of the smaller, indoor training grounds. Izuku took stock of the rather barren hallways and generally empty feeling of the building along the way. "I expected there to be a lot more students buzzing around," Izuku commented. "Did class already begin?" "UA isn't the only school that send their students on internships," Joke answered. "It's easier to coordinate if it all happens the same week. Otherwise, fabulous selections like myself wouldn't be available to help mold the youth." "Isn't molding the youth what you already do as a teacher?" Izuku replied with a small smile. "Yes, but this instance is special," she replied with a smile of her own. "You'll see why in a bit." When they finally reached the training ground, Joke left him to change into his costume, and his excitement shot through the roof when he finally put it on. The redesign felt even better on him than the original. He would have to do something nice for May after his internship was over. When Miss Joke returned, she couldn't help the smile that came upon her seeing the fellow green head practically bouncing around and shadow boxing in his suit. "Having fun?" she ventured with a chuckle, and it became a full-blown laugh when he jumped in surprise and sheepishly tried to make himself presentable. "So," Izuku coughed, desperately trying to move past what she had just seen, "are we sparring?" "Sorta," she answered with a smile that Izuku could swear had a subtle edge. "I've already seen a bit of what you can do in the festival, so I want to take you out of your comfort zone." Izuku was paying rapt attention to his instructor, or he was at least trying to. For whatever reason, he felt really fidgety and his stomach was refusing to settle. "For right now, just do what comes to mind," she vaguely continued, and only then did Izuku notice the blue glow about her. Later on, we'll see what kind of embers develop when you're experimenting. Izuku didn't know what she meant by that, but he wasn't really thinking about it. He was trying and failing to suppress laughter that was forcing its way out of him. The longer it went on, the more difficult it became, and his confused laughter was becoming audible. Before anything could dawn on him, however, he parried and sidestepped the gloved fist that shot into his field of vision. "Good situational awareness," she complimented, and Izuku now felt the laughs pouring out of him. He hunched over with his hands on his knees, and this joke was on him again with a punch that he just barely dodged. He could do nothing about the next punch, though, and he felt the entire impact of the golden plates along her knuckles driving into his gut. With the wind knocked out of him, he oddly felt like he was back to normal, and the smirk his instructor donned with her hands on her hips told him all he needed to know. "Your quirk," outburst, Izuku began with wide eyes. "So, that's why I was struck by laughter and couldn't concentrate." "Got it in one," she confirmed, and Izuku felt the giggles return to him. "Quirks often take focus to wield, and I want to see how well you do while you're disoriented." Izuku fought to stifle the laugh that escaped him at the same time that her fist cut through the air his face occupied a moment prior. Quickly backpedaling to create some space, he put his hands up to defend just as Miss Joke closed the distance between them and continued her onslaught. Izuku could keep focused just enough to defend and stay out of the way of her blows, but he couldn't get enough of a grasp on himself to activate his quirk. Still, he did his best to avoid the solid-looking swings. "Has anyone ever told you that you're phenomenal at dodging?" Miss Joke complimented. "You're not the first," Izuku struggled to answer, and that was a mistake that Miss Joke would ensure he regretted with a left hook to the ribs the second he lost his composure after responding. "Ah, you were doing so well. What happened?" she asked, knowing full well what happened to break his concentration. Izuku almost responded, but the near eruption of laughter kept his mouth shut, and he backpedaled once again to create more space. Miss Joke wouldn't let up, though, and the chase was on again. Izuku fought through the laughter to dodge the hits he could and block the ones he couldn't, but the pain from blocking her ridiculously hard punches started to catch up with him after a few minutes of the squabble. He hadn't even realized that he was heating up and glowing red after a while because he was so focused on keeping her away, but she was just as undeterred. Her gloves were fireproof, after all. Pretty soon, she managed to sweep him off his feet and went to capitalize, but her fist only slammed into a flat, orange wall of fire that materialized between them. Izuku, refusing to look a gift horse in the mouth, kicked the wall into her like he did to his alleyway stalker and created as much distance between her and himself as he could. "That was subconscious, wasn't it?" Miss Joke asked as she poked the wall a few times before it dispersed. "Yeah," Izuku hesitantly answered, and he was relieved when no more laughing fits came about. "Good. I wanted to see if you had anything else up your sleeve as well as if you could keep your cool under pressure," Miss Joke explained with her smile returning. "You did a great job, might I add." "All I could do was dodge and defend," Izuku muttered. "That's more than a lot of people can do in your position," she shot down his self-deprecation. "You kept your head on your shoulders very well the entire time when the function of my quirk is to pretty much mentally incapacitate you. Outburst isn't impossible to overcome, but it takes a level of focus and willpower that many don't have." That made him feel a little better about it, and she could tell. She patted him on the shoulder and offered him another smile. "Keeping your head on straight is a really important quality for pros, but it's doubly important for you." "What do you mean?" he asked. "Well, Mr. Beacon," she began with a wry grin, "you want to be a source of light for those in the darkness, right?" At his nod, she continued, but her grin disappeared. "Then it's crucial to keep in mind that not everyone will want a helping hand. There will be a non-insignificant amount of people who will intentionally try to get a rise out of you, get under your skin, or even attack people close to you specifically to get you to tarnish your own image and expose your hypocrisy. Don't give them the satisfaction." Izuku could only solemnly nod at that. It made sense, and he wasn't naive enough to deny the existence of crabs in a bucket, and he understood that some people only wished to spread misery. All Might's condition was a testament to that. Now, as for seeing what else you had under your sleeves, I watched your sports festival performance back last night to get familiar with your quirk a little more. Correct me if I'm wrong at any point, but I saw that green fire enhanced your strength, yellow enhanced your speed, red turned up the heat, and orange created barriers. Anything I'm missing? Izuku opened his hand, and a small, pink flame ignited in his palm, while a smaller, white one ignited in his hair. Pink heals, and white enhances my brain power. I recently discovered the possibility for violet, but I haven't been able to try it out yet. Yes, Joke nodded. What about when your fire has all of those colors at once? Is that an amalgamation of all of them together? Izuku was about to shake his head in response, but he paused and really thought about the question. Initially, no, it wasn't. It was just the base form my quirk took, and separating it into its individual parts brought on the specific enhancements. I could use it like any other fire quirk, but nothing further than that. However, during the last round of the sports festival, I tried cobbling the powers of the flames together to use multiple powers at once, and it worked, sorta. Explain, Joke said, now very interested. Well, he began, normally, the most I can do with my base kaleidoscopic fire is shoot it in fireballs, project it in a stream like a flamethrower, and make small explosions that are more colorful than powerful. I'm not great at any of those things, and I much prefer close combat anyway. Don't limit yourself, she cut in. If you have long-range options at your disposal, use them. There's no reason not to. It'll only make you a more versatile fighter and hero. When he nodded, and she could tell that he really took the advice to heart, she apologized for cutting him off and motioned for him to continue his explanation. Right, well, when I tried to match Todoroki's final attack with one of my own, I remember trying to bring the strength of each color together to maybe empower my base flames and get the best of both worlds. I had experimented with combinations before with some success, so I figured that it was worth a try for a Hail Mary. To my surprise, it actually felt like my quirk went into a second gear, if that makes sense. My flames felt way more intense than I've ever felt them be, and I felt a lot stronger than even in my Hulk mode. Hulk mode? Joke quirked an eyebrow. Oh, it's the name a friend of mine came up with for my green flames, he sheepishly clarified. She also made my costume. Keep that friend around, she did a fabulous job, she replied. Back to second gear, how much stronger did you feel? It felt like I transformed in an old shonen anime, Izuku joked, and Miss Joke snorted. For the scant few moments I was in that higher gear, I didn't feel any of the strain I normally would if I pushed my flames to their limits for too long, at least not until I woke up. Strain? Joke questioned. Yeah, green strains my muscles, white strains my brain, yellow strains my heart, and pink zaps my stamina, he answered. My costume was built to address the first one, but the others are a little harder to make adjustments for. The yellow in particular is a consistent problem. Is that because you feel that strain sooner than the others, or is it just because you use the yellow flames more often? Probably the latter. I've been able to handle using the yellow flames for longer than I have in the past, and it's certainly longer than when I first activated my quirk. But recently, it feels like I've sort of plateaued. I don't feel like I'm advancing towards lengthening my time wielding the flames without feeling considerable strain anymore. Miss Joke hummed in consideration. Maybe, if you don't feel any strain in your second gear, the issue isn't that you've plateaued. Maybe you've just hit a glass ceiling. Izuku was confused at the use of that metaphor. Isn't that pretty much the same thing? Her smirk returned. In terms of tangible development, yes. In terms of pure potential for further development, no. If your base flames have a second gear, then it's possible that your other flames have second gears as well. In your yellow's second gear, that strain may be non-existent. Hence, glass ceiling. It can be busted through. Breaking limits like that tends to happen with quirk awakenings. Izuku thoughtfully considered the idea. The Usj had instigated a mini-awakening that resulted in his blue flames, and he still hadn't explored the full extent of his quirk. So further awakenings that enhanced the potential of his quirk even more weren't outside of the realm of possibility at all. I can see that gave you a lot to think about, Miss Joke commented. It certainly did, Izuku agreed. How am I going to break through that glass ceiling? We have the whole week to figure that out, Miss Joke cheered. For right now, let's continue the spar. You dodge well, but I want to see you fight back through the laughter. Izuku sighed, and his face contorted into one of determination. I'm ready. I'm sorry to show up so unexpectedly. Hope you don't mind, Detective Chukachi said to Toshinori as the two sat down for tea inside one of the teachers' lounges at UA. Please, it's always a pleasure to see you, Tsukachi, Toshinori assured. So, how's the investigation going? Well, there were a number of villains that attacked the Usj, the detective began, but we're puzzled by one in particular, the one you fought that they called Nomu. Ah, that strong bird guy, All Might remembered. We went ahead and ran some tests on Nomu's DNA, and what we found was disturbing to say the least, Tsukachi continued. What exactly did you find? Toshinori's gaunt face pulled into a serious frown. I want to first stress that we're not asking you to be a part of this investigation, he started while looking the emaciated man in his sunken eyes. For all intents and purposes, this is a leak. I just felt that I owed it to you to let you know about what we might have uncovered. It could lead us to the one in charge. Go on, Toshinori calmly urged. After several failed attempts at interrogation, it became clear that Nomu can't speak, the detective explained. He shows no reaction to anything at all. It's as if he literally can't think for himself no matter what's going on around him. Tsukachi slid a photo of a mugshot across the table. We discovered that he used to be a low-level thug with a record of assault and extortion. Where this ties into the potential mastermind of the League is that his genetic makeup has been altered drastically. We found the DNA of 4 different people within him. Someone combined people's DNA to make this guy? Toshinori asked with a hand on his chin. Is he even human anymore? That depends on how you want to look at it, the detective sighed. To oversimplify, his body has been altered so that he can hold multiple quirks at once. His brain's apparent lack of processing power probably comes from the burden that causes, but he shouldn't have multiple quirks in the first place, regardless of how much DNA has been inserted into his genetic makeup. Tsukachi looked Toshinori directly in the eye. The only way to accomplish that would be to completely integrate the new quirks into someone's genetic makeup, and we only know of one person with the ability to do that. Toshinori had been getting more and more pale as the detective spoke, but the last line sent him over the edge, and he shot to his feet. It can't be. This has to be a mistake. He's dead. It's our only reasonable conclusion, Tsukachi unflinchingly replied. It's why I came. I had to let you know immediately. Toshinori walked towards the window and stared out into the horizon. He slowly started to bulk up as One for All made its presence known. So, he's back, he gritted out. Now more than ever, I need to find a successor. Izuku eased himself out of the passenger seat of Miss Joke's car, and he gingerly followed her out of the parking lot of an apartment complex and up a set of stairs. He had elected not to heal himself with his pink flames until they reached her apartment so that the pain of being tagged set into his memory for future sparring sessions, and she found it amusing enough to leave alone. It seemed like a good idea to him at first, but he came to regret it later when she took him on patrol with her that evening. Luckily, they didn't encounter anything major along the way. When they finally reached her apartment, Izuku breathed a sigh of relief and finally ignited a pink blanket of fire across his body. You really do hit hard. Joke. Amateur boxing was originally my backup plan if heroics didn't work out, she casually replied, and she chuckled at the sight of his eyes bugging out at that bit of information. That actually makes sense, Izuku considered, thinking back to her rather impressive footwork during their spars. Then, something else occurred to him. Wait, what do you mean if heroics didn't work out? Truthfully, it doesn't work out for a lot of people, she answered. A decent percentage of pros flame out in their first year on the job for one reason or another. Why is that? He asked, finding a spot on her couch. Think of heroics as a job with commission pay, no pun intended that time, she began to explain, taking a spot on the other end of her couch. When a crime is committed and a pro isn't there on the scene already, police contact the server for pro heroes in whatever district they're in to assist. Any available pros that take the request head to the scene, and then we file the reports based on whatever services we provided. That can range from assisting with arrests, rescuing people from danger, crowd control, etc. Afterward, the HPSC looks over the details and decides what we're paid. You don't sound terribly excited about that part, Izuku commented, taking note of the way her eyes and usually joyful demeanor dimmed during the explanation. She sighed, and she took a long look at him. You're young, so you haven't yet been exposed to the cutthroat business of heroics. You're paid based on the work you do in a given situation, which already incentivizes some people to become glory hounds purely for the extra money, but you're also paid based on what the commission deems you're worth. Bigger names are generally compensated more for the same amount of work as smaller ones because they're more visible. Most pros outside of the top 10 have secondary sources of income, frankly because they need to in order to make ends meet. Even those within the top 10 get brand deals or have other business ventures that bolster their income. Sidekicks have the benefit of belonging to an agency and get their paychecks from the agency itself, but many pros that attempt to branch out of that or go it alone from the start oftentimes just don't make enough money to be a hero full-time. And there's no guarantee that they ever would. Oh, was all Izuku could manage in response. That was a sobering explanation. But heroics isn't about the money, right? You're right, it isn't, or it shouldn't be, she sighed. True heroes aren't out there saving people just to get paid. They do it because it's the right thing to do, and people deserve to feel safe, happy, and comfortable. On the other hand, folks gotta eat. Her face took on an annoyed expression. It's why people like Uobami lean so heavily into their secondary ventures, although she probably overdoes it. That makes sense, I guess, Izuku said a little lowly. It was all he could manage after hearing all of that. Maybe that was why his mother was so jaded. Well, on that ridiculously depressing note, make yourself at home, she declared, her usual cheer back in full swing. Whether or not it was legitimate was up for debate. I don't have an agency to house you in, so we'll have to make do here. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. You can have all of the milk left in the fridge since I don't really do dairy. The guest room is down the hall, last on the right. The bathroom is next door to it. Don't be afraid to holler if you need anything at all. Izuku gratefully nodded, and he took his suitcase and costume to the guest room. It was pretty Spartan, which he was mostly expecting. He unpacked his suitcase and slid his costume case under the bed, and after a hot shower, he finally climbed into bed. Everything missed. Joke had said earlier was running through his brain, and he tried to put all of it out of his mind to get some sleep. He just hoped that he wouldn't just be trading out those thoughts for another nightmare, but it was to no avail. The next day, an important business meeting was set to take place. The dingy bar that acted as the base of operation for the League of Villains saw a new patron in the form of a tall, muscular man wrapped in bandages and a red scarf that hid his lack of a nose. The moment he stepped out of the portal that led him there, he laid his eyes on the only other occupants, and his red eyes narrowed. "Oh, I see," he muttered. "You must be the ones that attacked Yua, and you want to recruit me to build up your little group again. Is that it?" Tamura Shigaraki sat at edge of the bar in front of the hero killer, Stain, with Kurogiri standing in his usual place behind the bar. He looked relaxed as he compulsively cleaned the already spotless glasses, but he was anything but. Tamura had been rather ambitious in his pitch to Stain, but he wasn't sure how well "join us so we can kill All Might and burn the world down" was going to go over with the fanatical murderer. "Yeah," Tamura confirmed. "It'll be great. You've got a ton of experience with this already." "And what's your mission?" Stain pressed. Tamura did not immediately respond. He stared at Stain, then his gaze flickered back to the monitor in the room that read, "Sound only." "For now, I really just want to kill All Might. I like destroying anything that pisses me off." Stain did not miss the way Tamura's gaze shifted to the monitor, and it only confirmed to the man that there was another party listening in on the conversation. Who that party was exactly, Stain didn't know, and he honestly didn't really like the possibilities of who it could have been. Putting that disconcerting thought aside, though, he analyzed the answer he was given. While it didn't quite feel disingenuous, he still felt that there was a disconnect in the young man's mind about his ultimate goals. "I was a fool to think you could offer me anything," Stain darkly growled. "It turns out, you're the type of person I hate most in this world. What's the point of killing without any conviction? Your mission is that of a child throwing a tantrum. What are you even seeking to accomplish? Who even are you? What do you represent?" As Stain unsheathed a knife, Kurogiri turned to the screen. "Sensei, should I step in?" "Let it happen. I'm curious to see how Tamura will handle this. He must mature to reach his potential, and this may be the kick in the pants he needs in order to refocus and stop asking frivolous questions." Kurogiri reluctantly stayed his hand as Stain stalked toward the unnervingly silent Tamura. "What's on the agenda for today?" Izuku asked his joke as they strolled through the largely empty halls of Ketsubutsu. "There's something I want to show you," she vaguely responded with a grin. He was intrigued, but he knew that he wouldn't get any hints from her, so he didn't ask any further questions and just followed her lead. As they walked, they ended up exiting the building entirely through one of the rear exits, and they walked down a path leading to another, smaller set of buildings. "These are dorms set in place for any student who wishes to attend but lives too far away or is an exchange student of some kind," she explained. "I wouldn't be surprised if UA has something similar." "It does, but only a few people use them to my knowledge," Izuku replied. "Well, ours are a little bit unique," she said as they approached a dorm building labeled VR1. They entered the building, and Izuku noticed that the lobby was buzzing with activity. Teenagers ranging from ages that were slightly younger than himself to clearly in their early 20s were abound. Some were socializing, others were sitting quietly in front of the TV watching live news coverage of Mirko beating up a villain near Ketsubutsu, and a few were separated from the crowd, content to sit by themselves. It was clear that they were all called to the lobby beforehand, as a few mutters of "finally" were heard when the two entered the lobby. "Hey guys, I've got an intern," Joke happily announced. The collective attention of the room was now on them, and, while most in the room were simply curious about what they were called to congregate for, a few of them recognized Izuku. "Hey, isn't he the kid from the sports festival?" one of the younger boys pointed out. "The one that blew up the ring with Endeavor's kid." "Stop calling people who are clearly older than you kid, dude," an older boy reprimanded. He had the same spiky, brown hair as the younger boy, and they both had bright orange eyes. Perhaps they were brothers? "Not just the sports festival," came a soft, feminine voice from the corner of the room, and Izuku saw a shorter girl with the head of a black cat and a black bow in her fur beside her ear approaching him. Izuku's green eyes met the dim, yellow sclere with slitted, black pupils, and the two silently observed each other. "Vanta approaching someone? That's new," came a hushed voice from across the room, but not hushed enough for Izuku to miss it among the crowd. "You're the boy from that interview," she softly spoke, and nothing else really needed to be said. as many others in the room were paying close attention now. "Yeah, that would be me," Izuku answered calmly and extended his hand. "Izuku Midoriya, it's lovely to meet you." The girl stared down at the offered hand with mild apprehension, and she met his gaze once again, searching his eyes and face for any signs of deception whatsoever. Izuku only offered her a soft smile in return, and he patiently waited for her to make any decision she felt comfortable with. After a few more seconds, she tentatively met the offered hand with her own, gently wrapping her clawed hand around his for the handshake. "Just call me Vanta," she finally spoke. "Do you know where you are?" "I haven't told him yet," Miss Joke answered from beside him. "Midoriya, welcome to the Villain Rehabilitation Program at Ketsubutsu. We find at-risk youth that are, by circumstance or opportunity, diving into criminal behavior, and provide them with resources that will nip any descent into villainy in the bud. Just as well, we provide a place for villains attempting reform to get any help, support, or education they may need. Those resources can come in the form of counseling, therapy, psychiatric help, drug treatment, general stability in the form of a guaranteed place to sleep and meal to eat, and a place to build positive relationships." She looked him in the eye with more seriousness than she had previously. "You said that you wanted to extend a helping hand to those lost in the cracks of society. Well, this is what some of that looks like." Izuku turned a thoughtful eye back to Vanta, and she could no longer meet his eye. He would not have any of that, so he took her clawed hand once again in both of his hands. "It makes me happy that you're doing well, Vanta. All of you. I don't know your individual situations, but I'll gladly sit and listen to each of your stories." That got many in the room to relax, and some even smiled. Vanta, meanwhile, was really glad that her pitch-black fur hid her blush, and she refused to meet his eye for different reasons. Yeah, well, doing well is the operative phrase. Doing better would probably be more accurate. "Let's pull up some chairs," Izuku prompted. "Tell me anything you'd like." Tamura Shigaraki was not having a good day. He had been inspired by Spinner's ridiculous cosplay to scour the internet for any info on the hero killer. He found a few forum posts that were talking about him and his message. Many of them were old, so it was clear that he had been at it for a while, and many of those forum posters were fanatically behind the sentiments he touted. It seemed like a no-brainer to offer him an invitation to the League of Villains. It ultimately resulted in him on the floor of the bar with a serrated blade in his shoulder, and the man himself hovering above him poised to finish him off. He was nearly out of his bandages from the astier, but his arm was still a pain in the ass, so he couldn't really defend himself. All the while, he was being pressed with questions that he would admit to having in the back of his mind, but refused to address in full because they brought up even more uncomfortable questions and lines of thought that he really shouldn't be having. "You want me to join your crumbling little league, but you won't accomplish anything without true conviction and desire," Stain spat. "Hell, I don't even get the feeling that you have any real identity to yourself. Without those, you'll always be an aimless weakling that achieves nothing. That's how you ended up like this in the first place." "Hey now, you're being a little rough, don't you think?" Tamura gritted out with a chuckle. "At least buy me a drink first." That took Stain completely off guard, and he momentarily froze in bemusement. That was more than enough time for Tamura to grab the blade with his non-injured hand and turn it to dust, and Stain leaped backward off of him. "Kurogiri, get this guy out of here," Tamura instructed. "I'm sorry, I can't move," Kurogiri struggled. "It must be the hero killer's quirk at work." "The word hero has lost all meaning in this society," Stain began, seemingly prompted by the warp user's utterance of the word. "The world is overrun by fakes and criminals like you who chase petty dreams and utter nonsense." He readied himself for another strike at Tamura. "They must all be purged." "You sure talk a lot," Tamura interrupted as he stood up, much to Stain's chagrin. "Conviction? Maybe I don't have anything as loaded as that right now, but I can tell you for sure that what I desire is to do whatever the hell I want to do for once. And maybe what I want to do is to kill All Might and everything he represents. If this world wants to worship trash like him, I'll destroy their beloved symbol of peace and then crush them while they're in shock. Stain went wide-eyed at the statement, but Tamura wasn't done. Symbol of peace, he practically spat. Peace for who? Certainly not for everyone. People are tossed aside and forgotten about all the time, and no one cares about them. The other supposed heroes turn their noses up since it's not convenient for them, and the civilians look the other way because a hero will come to help for sure. But no one ever does. Not All Might, not anyone. It all needs to crumble. Stain considered him much more carefully now. What he was saying painted the villain in a much more three-dimensional picture than he could see initially, and he could even empathize with the sentiment. However, it still felt entirely too disconnected. The last of my injuries were so close to healing up. Save for this arm, Tamura lamented. You shouldn't play around with knives, you dickhead. We don't have healers in our party. I see now, Stain lowly began. You have conflicting ideals. No, not ideals, but your mind and spirit are in conflict. Huh? Tamura scratched his neck. The hell are you talking about? You truly believe what you're saying, but your actions speak a different tune, Stain continued. I can see your nature, as well as the box you're inhabiting. Our goals fundamentally oppose each other, but this was not in vain. We agree that we need to destroy the current order for any change to be possible. I'm over this, Tamura sighed. Just leave. Drop dead. I'm the kind of person you hate the most in this world, right? I was testing your resolve, Stain countered while sheathing his blades. People always show their true colors when on the verge of death, and I got my answer loud and clear. There is a warped sprout of conviction rooted deep inside you, but you'll never be able to access it until you find out who you truly are. There was that phrase again, and it was really pissing Tamura off. Find that out, and then come find me, Stain instructed. We'll see how that conviction blooms, and if I like what I see, we'll do business. If not, I'll just snuff you out. You think you can get rid of me? Tamura growled, now reaching his last nerve with the older man. I'm free, Kurogiri interjected before Tamura could do something everyone would regret. Get him out of here, Tamura commanded. We don't need a griefer like him in our party. I strongly suggest you reconsider, Kurogiri urged. This man will be a great asset if he joins us. My business here is done. Now return me to Hasu. Stain gave a command of his own. There are still false heroes I must attend to there. Meanwhile, All for One was listening to the interaction with a frown. Tamura wasn't supposed to remember what he had referenced just yet. He was curious to see what would come of that if he did remember. It could either hasten his development or cause him to self-destruct entirely. Either way, he'd have to gently guide Tamura back onto the correct path. Back in Hasu, Iida had just finished his daily patrol with the hero he was interning with, Manuel, and they were back at his agency. Iida was a little perturbed that he hadn't caught hide nor hair of Stain, and that was largely because the entire city was on alert after what happened to Ingenium. Stain would probably only show his face in an alleyway, and Iida couldn't just break off from his mentor to search every alley in the city. The nice thing about having the whole city on alert is that no villains would dare come out, Manuel commented with his usual easygoing demeanor. Iida remarked, broken out of his thoughts by Manuel's statement. Oh, sure. Manuel's light countenance faded, and a serious look overtook his features. I got an interesting message from your teacher before you first showed up. Iida looked at the pro-hero in surprise and a bit of confusion. He didn't know what his homeroom teacher could have possibly reached out to Manuel about, especially if it concerned him. He suspects that you took this internship so that you'll be in the same city as the hero killer, he gravely spoke. Iida's face remained carefully blank, but his body went rigid. Manuel sighed, and he pulled up a chair. Sit down, Tenya. Iida did so, stiffly grabbing a chair of his own and sitting at the table across from Manuel. I know what you're going through, he began, and he put his hand up to halt Ida's protests. Trust me, I do. Just hear me out. Iida settled down and made no further indication that he'd speak. My parents were killed by a villain when I was in my last few years of high school, the man revealed, and Ida's eyes went wide. Butchered them. Started out as a regular mugging, but they tried to fight back. He had an alligator mutation, and he literally tore them apart. Iida did not know how to respond to that, but Manuel continued on regardless. I wanted to be a pro-hero even before then, but that only fueled my drive even more to get licensed, partially to do what I've always wanted and help people, but mostly to find the man who killed my parents and get justice for them. A bitter chuckle escaped him. What justice even meant for me back then, I had no idea. I still don't, in all honesty. Iida was silent at that revelation. He would never have guessed from his mentor's light, laid-back demeanor that he was carrying such pain with him. Did you find him? Eventually, yeah, he answered while looking at the floor. Another silence followed as Iida worked up the nerve to ask his next question. Did you? Yes. A much longer silence came between them. Manuel did not bring his eyes up from the floor, and Iida did not expect that answer from him whatsoever. The silence dragged on for a few minutes while the teen processed what he had been told, and Manuel finally wrenched his gaze from the ground and focused it onto Iida. The commission was able to write it off as unfortunate accident, but there was nothing accidental about it. I knew exactly how much water pressure was necessary to crush a skull, but the fact that he was violently resisting and was an active danger to innocents around him gave me plausible deniability. Iida was beginning to feel way out of his depth the more the conversation progressed. There was way too much to unpack from that simple statement alone. Still, there was something he needed to know. Did you feel any better afterward? No. The immediacy of the answer struck him right in the gut. There was no hesitation whatsoever. Avenging his parents' murder did not do anything for him. You're starting to get it, I see, Manuel continued after taking stock of Iida's pale, pained expression. It didn't bring my parents back. They're still gone, and they always will be. The only difference is that I have blood on my hands now, too. I don't feel any better having done it, and I don't think my parents would have wanted that for me, anyway. Manuel gave Iida a long, hard look. You still have your brother. He's still alive. Don't throw away your ability to live alongside him, because that's exactly what going after Stain will accomplish, regardless of the result. With that, Manuel stood up and exited the room, leaving Iida alone with his thoughts. Izuku was very much enjoying his internship with MS. Joke. She recognized right off the bat that there wasn't much that she could teach him as far as combat went, and that wasn't her ultimate goal with the internship anyway. Instead, they spent time in 3 areas, experimenting with his quirk, working on his outward presentation, and getting more perspective on what circumstances can make a villain out of anyone. Of all 3, he could confidently say that he enjoyed his visits to the VRP the most. The first talk he had with them was rocky, as many of them were understandably cagey about their pasts and what specifically landed them there. However, after some time had passed and a few of the braver souls shared their stories, more people began to open up. The stories he heard were even more sobering than the salary talk he had with MS. Joke on the first night. Everyone had come from and with some kind of trauma. The duo of brothers he met on the first day were products of a neglectful and drug-addled household, and on nights when their parents were too strung out to care for them, they turned to attacking and mugging random civilians for cash to feed themselves. One such incident resulted in their Mark being left crippled when he tried to defend himself. Their story was one of the lighter ones of the bunch. There was another tale from a young man with a snake mutation, in that he was literally a snake with human arms and legs who ran away from a group home he was in and joined up with a small-time gang that made and sold Trigger. Apparently, that gang encroached onto Yakuza territory, and a confrontation resulted in him being the only survivor. The haunted look in his eyes when he recounted how the only family he ever really had was reduced to bloody smears on the wall with a single touch stuck with Izuku, and he didn't press the young man any further. He, surprisingly, didn't get much out of Vanta. He figured that one of the first to recognize and approach him would also be one of the first to open up. But all she really revealed was that she and her best friend were victims of some vicious anti-mutant quirkism at their old high school, and something horrible happened to her friend that led her down a dark path in the pursuit of revenge and venting her anger. She wouldn't go into detail about the revenge or why she even sought it out, and if he was reading between the lines correctly, he didn't imagine she ever would. Not to him, at least. He wouldn't push her, though. When Izuku and Miss Joke weren't with the VRP, they were in one of the training grounds. Miss Joke had taken to trying to bring out Izuku's orange flames as more than just a reflexive action. That usually came in the form of her punching him while he was forbidden from moving a muscle to defend. Since his orange flames made a habit of coming out when he truly needed it, he could attempt to become familiar with the sensation and possibly draw it out manually. He was successful to a point. He couldn't draw it out all of the time, but in the instances that he was able to, he could maintain and even manipulate the size and shape of the barriers rather easily. It just took a bit of concentration. "Nicely done, Beacon," she complimented after the barrier he maintained blocked a final punch from her. That was another thing. She had taken to referring to him as only his hero name so that he'd get in the habit of internalizing and responding to it. "Thanks, Miss Joke," Izuku replied as he dispersed his flames and took a seat on the floor to catch his breath. They had been at it for quite a while, and the day was drawing to a close. Now, usually we'd round out the day with an evening patrol, but the areas surrounding hero schools are usually pretty safe by virtue of so many pros being in a small-ish area, she began. So, since I want you to get a little bit more practical experience in a fairly safe setting, we'll be going on a field trip. Izuku's interest was piqued. "Where to?" "Shibuya," she cheered. "Wait, Shibuya in Tokyo?" Izuku fretted. "But there are so many people there, and I don't want to potentially embarrass myself before my career even starts." "That didn't stop you in the sports festival," she replied with a quirked eyebrow, and Izuku had to concede that point. "It'll be fine. You've already made yourself semi-famous, so you're working with goodwill to start. Plus, a larger population density equates to more hero agencies, so their attention won't all be on you anyway." Izuku nodded, and after a quick break to regain their stamina, the two set off in her car towards the train station for a quicker trip into the massive city. In the bar that played host to the rebuilding League of Villains, Tamura stewed in one of the booths while Kurogiri resumed his barman without customers routine. "Tamura, what are you thinking about?" came the familiar deep voice from the monitor. "The hero killer, he talks all high and mighty, but he's wasting his time focusing on a small stage," Tamura rasped. "You shouldn't spurn his methods," Kurogiri spoke up. "The reality is that in all of the cities that Stain has appeared, the crime rates have fallen significantly, be it out of fear or out of a greater presence from the heroes. Whoop-de-doo, heroes are working harder because they'd be killed otherwise," Tamura spat. "Such a noble incentive, right? Absolute horseshit." "You seem upset about the situation," All for One commented with an unseen grin. "What do you intend to do, I wonder? I, personally, would not take that level of disrespect in my own base, and no successor of mine would, either." Tamura quickly transitioned from stewing to festering, and, much to All for One's delight, he stood up and slammed his uninjured hand on the table, decaying it in the process. "Sensei, how many nomus are ready?" Tamura asked in his anger. "I will allow you 3 of them," the man answered. Tamura ignored the mild condescension that came with the non-answer to his question, and he looked to his misty companion. "Kurogiri, we're going to Hasu." "I'll make." Izuku yawned as he blearily made his way down the hall and towards the kitchen. Upon arrival, he opened the fridge and looked around for anything he could slap together for breakfast. His eyes landed on a carton of milk, and he grabbed it and instinctively put it up to his nose to check the freshness. The sour aroma hit him in the nostrils with a vengeance, and his face contorted before he made to toss the milk out. However, before he could, he had a strange thought. It was a dumb, completely ridiculous thought, but it was a thought nonetheless. Could I heal an upset stomach with my pink flames if I drank this milk? He wondered aloud. He looked around the room to ensure that he was alone and no one would catch him in the act, and when he was satisfied that he wouldn't be interrupted, he slowly brought the milk to his mouth. Suddenly, a bright, yellow light flashed in the center of the room, and a teenage girl with long, white hair, a horn on the right side of her forehead, and wide, red eyes wearing a tattered, blood-stained version of his own hero costume appeared beside him. She frantically smacked the milk out of his hand before he could react, spilling it all over the floor. When he turned a bewildered gaze to her, she lunged and hugged him so tightly that he was certain she truly believed that he would disappear otherwise. He didn't know what the hell was going on, but he felt compelled to gently pat her on the back, which elicited a sniffle from the girl before she choked her tears back and stepped away from him. Just as quickly as she was there, she vanished in the same bright, yellow light as before. Izuku was left alone in the kitchen and standing next to a puddle of sour milk until he heard the floorboards creak, and he saw Miss Joke standing in the doorway looking equally befuddled. She looked at him, then she looked at the puddle of milk, and then she looked back at him. Is she coming back to clean that up? The train ride was rather calm to start. Izuku and Miss Joke made light conversation about whatever came to mind, but internally, Izuku's brain was on other matters. He had tried to check in on Iida, but his friend read the message and didn't respond. That was highly unusual for him, and it made Izuku anxious. Peering out of the window and seeing that they were passing through Hasu only exacerbated his worry. Something wrong? Joke asked from beside him with concern of her own dressing her face. I'm worried about my friend, Izuku revealed. His brother was attacked and crippled by the hero killer, and he's been shutting us out recently. Her concerned frown became a sympathetic one, and she patted his shoulder. I get that. People grieve in their own ways, and pain like that takes time to heal. He'll come around when he's ready, so be there for him as best as you can in the interim. Whoa, that building just exploded, a passenger muttered. I'm really trying, Izuku sighed, though he paid attention to what was going on in his periphery. I'm worried that he's going to do something stupid and dangerous, though. Like personally seek revenge, she asked. Yeah, he confirmed. He's interning in Hasu, and I strongly suspect that it was for that reason alone. Yo, is that flying out there? The same passenger muttered again. Well, as morbid as it is to admit, we'll be avoiding Hasu as much as we can, she revealed, keeping aware of what was happening in her periphery as well. The place is on high alert with the hero killer around, so general crime will be pretty non-existent. But I'm not comfortable taking you there with a hero killer present despite that. Personally, I don't think any interns should be there right now. That's understandable, Izuku nodded, but their attention was refocused when an announcement came over the train car. Attention passengers, please hold onto your seats. The announcement was interrupted when a pro-hero in a white parka was slammed into the train car by a tall, grotesque, sickly gray creature. Closer inspection revealed the creature to have 4 eyes poking out of an exposed brain, and Izuku went pale. Nomu, he cried. Nomu? Joke asked. A creature that helped attack the Usaja, he quickly explained. Sick, dangerous science experiment. Stay back and protect the passengers, Joke ordered before rushing to the aid of the pro-hero that the Nomu had accosted. She got in between them and batted the creature's arm away from him before it could squeeze his head, and she punched it right in its exposed brain. The creature, while momentarily stunned, was otherwise unaffected, but it was more than enough time for Izuku to slam a green fist of his own into the Nomu before it could retaliate, blasting it out of the train entirely and through a brand new hole in the guard wall beside the track. There was no moment to rest or celebrate, though, as the nomu got up with an angry screech and set its sights back on the train. "You too, go on and take that monster down," the downed pro coughed to the mentor-intern duo. "I'll hold down the fort here." Before Miss Joke could protest and order Izuku to stay, he bounded through the hole in the train and met the nomu's charge. Joke huffed and followed suit, clicking a hidden trigger in her gloves that protruded spikes from her already reinforced knuckles. She got down to the ground in time to see her student knock the creature away again with a hard right hook. "Are these things sentient?" she asked as she got into a stance beside him. "Not really," he denied. "I don't even know if they're human." "Then outburst won't work here," she sighed in agitation. "Guess it's the hard way from here on out." "Such a brazen villain attack," Manuel gaped before motioning to Iida beside him. "This isn't good. Come on, we're rolling." As Manuel ran, he took in the sounds of chaos and distress around him. It was only when they were nearing the blaze of an explosion in a cluster of buildings did he notice the lack of footsteps behind him. When he turned around, his intern was nowhere to be seen. "Got him, Nit," he cursed. "I'd hoped he'd at least think a little harder about it." Manuel looked back at the fire, and the screams of terror and panic emanating from the area echoed in his ears. He spared a final glance back in the direction he came from, and he cursed again. "You'd better pull through, kid. Please don't make me have to bring that news to your family." With that, Manuel darted in the direction of the fire and chaos, readying his quirk to put out any and all flames. Izuku, blanketed in yellow fire, bounced around from wall to wall while the nomu swung wildly at him from the street. He was glad that the area they were in was relatively isolated, and anyone that had been there initially had long since fled. This Joke, meanwhile, attacked the rampaging monster in its blind spots while its attention was focused on Izuku. Having an extra set of eyes slightly towards the back of its head made that prospect a little more difficult, though. "Beacon, any way you can hold him still for a sec?" she shouted. "I'll try my best," he responded as he bounced off the wall of a building and bulleted toward the awaiting nomu. The nomu opened its maw, and its tongue grew and sprouted a myriad of tentacles that ensnared the yellow blur before he could reach it. Izuku struggled to free himself, but the hold was incredibly constricting, and he could feel it tightening while the nomu made to take another swing at him. His yellow flames flickered to crimson, and he quickly heated himself up, severely burning the tongue's tentacles and forcing the nomu to release him in the process. Miss Joke wasted no time appearing beside the nomu, and she drove her spiked glove into the nomu's kidney where a kidney would be on a regular person, at least, puncturing its tough skin and digging into the side of the creature. She wasn't done, though, and she activated another switch within her glove to unleash a very potent electric shock, about 500,000 volts. It only succeeded in stunning the nomu for a brief moment, as the creature appeared to absorb the electricity entirely. Joke only had a second to jump backward before the nomu unleashed that same electric shock onto the surrounding area, and she thanked her lucky stars that a blanket of orange fire covered her from head to toe just before the electricity reached her. She shot her intern a quick thumbs up with a grin before flicking her wrist and shooting a retractable baton from her thick, metal wrist guard. With a quick point upwards and a slam of her fist into her palm directed towards Izuku, she re-engaged the nomu. Izuku immediately understood his instructions and leaped onto the sides of the buildings, bouncing from one to another in another yellow blur until he was nearing the top of one of them. Deciding he had more than enough height, he flickered back to green and plummeted toward the ground with his fist ready to slam into the creature's exposed brain, and slam he did. Just as the nomu slapped the baton away and grabbed a hold of the Miss Joke's wrist, Izuku pounded down onto the unholy creation with the force of a missile, cratering it into the street and out of commission. Izuku stared down at the creature for a considerable amount of time as the adrenaline was beginning to wear off, but a faint twitch and moan from the nomu indicated to him that he had not killed it, and he released the breath that he didn't realize that he was holding. Joke stepped into the crater and placed a hand on his shoulder, and she offered him a bright grin with a proud thumbs up. Izuku couldn't fight the smile that came to him in response. "I didn't know you had so much support gear in your gloves," he remarked as they stepped out of the crater. "Like I said before, Outburst isn't impossible to escape, and there will be times where it's wholly ineffective," she explained with a cheeky smirk. "Gotta have ways to incapacitate the target without it so that I don't get caught with my pants down. No decent pro is a one-trick pony, after all." "You know, I heard that from Eraserhead once," Izuku reminisced. "Who do you think I picked it up from?" she answered with a wink. "Nicely done," approached a deep voice from further down the street. The two looked up and were surprised to see Endeavor surveying the scene. He was flanked by his sidekicks and, surprisingly to Izuku, his own son, Todoroki Shoto. That was technically his hero name as well, and he probably preferred to be called by that name anyway. His sidekicks sprang into action and restrained the nomu that had begun to squirm, and the large man looked over Izuku for a moment before turning to Miss Joke and the others. "I will deal with the other villains," he firmly declared. "Come, Shoto, you have much to learn." The teen in question only sighed and followed his father after sending Izuku a nod. Izuku turned to his mentor to say something, but she beat him to the punch. "If anyone asks, I granted you full permission to use your quirk in defense of the city and safety of those in harm," she told him in no uncertain terms. "I will handle any potential fallout from this, but I don't really foresee any. Still, better safe than sorry. Let's go assist the rescue efforts." "About that," Izuku began, and Miss Joke quirked an eyebrow. "I need to find my friend. I have a very bad feeling that he's going after the hero killer." "Absolutely not. I'm not going with the goal of fighting him, just to prevent my friend from doing something stupid." "Then I'll go with you." "I'd be much faster going alone. I'll send you my location right away if I land in any trouble."
Joke was clearly not on board with the plan.
But Izuku did not have time to waste. He lit up in a yellow flame and offered her an apologetic grimace. "I'm gonna grab him and be right out. Give me any punishment you see fit." On that note, he bounded off into the city towards the back alleys, leaving an angry and worried Miss Joke behind. Izuku frantically made a mad dash through the city in search of his friend. He could only wish to himself on repeat that he wouldn't end up being late. Sweeping through the labyrinth of dirty, dingy alleys of Hasu, Izuku eventually happened upon the exact scene he was looking for, but not the one he wanted. Before him, the hero killer himself was standing above Iida with his bloody sword poised to end the teen's life. Izuku momentarily saw red, and he closed the distance between them and leveled Stain with a hard punch to the jaw, saving Iida from certain death. "Don't you dare lay a finger on him," Izuku snarled. Iida gasped in his paralyzed state on the ground. He couldn't really see who had arrived, but he recognized that voice. Midoriya. "I will properly yell at you about this when we're not in mortal peril," Izuku scolded. "For now, we need to get to the street and get help from the pros." I can't move my body," Iida strained. "It must be his quirk. Since he cut me, I've been paralyzed." "Shit," Izuku cursed. "So, cutting must activate his quirk. That tracks with what his survivors have said about him." Only then did Izuku notice that they were not alone with Stain in the alley. He saw another pro-hero, Native, laying prone against the wall past where Stain was standing. That truly complicated matters. Getting Iida out of there was one thing, but getting them both out while avoiding Stain's attacks was another thing entirely, and he wasn't sure that he could protect both of them while also protecting himself enough to escape with them. It wasn't like he could sacrifice himself for them to escape. They clearly couldn't move, so they literally relied on his mobility in order to survive. He couldn't cut any corners or be needlessly self-sacrificial, otherwise they would all die. "Midoriya, please," Iida ground out. "Don't get involved. This has nothing to do with you." "Out of the question," Izuku almost snarled back, much to Ida's consternation. "So, you came to your friend's rescue," Stain began. "You even made a big entrance. Unfortunately, I have a duty to kill him, and this fake masquerading as a hero. When your friend chose to fight me, it guaranteed that the weaker of us would be culled." Stain's eyes narrowed at Izuku. "So, he who seeks to rescue the damned, what will you do?" Izuku gritted his teeth, and he covertly fished his phone from his suit to send his location to Miss Joke. For added measure, he sent it alongside a haphazardly typed message to Shoto on the possibility that he'd bring his father with him. Loath as he was to admit it, Endeavor was exceptionally powerful, and taking Stain down would be all but guaranteed with his inclusion. Until then, I need to kill time. Every quirk has a weakness, and every ability has a limit. Maybe I can find out what his is if I get him talking. "You know of me?" Izuku asked in reference to the "he who seeks to rescue the damned" comment. "Of course," Stain rasped. "You're the boy who wants to extend a hand to those left behind by society, the ones that not even All Might could save. An admirable sentiment, but why? Someone has to be there for them, especially if no one ever has been. If I can do that, then why not? Why not succeed All Might? Why not be there for everybody? We're only here right now because All Might can't be there for everyone himself. He may be inhumanly powerful, but he's not omnipotent. And who's to say that I'd do any better of a job at it than him?" After a brief moment of silence, Stain nodded. "Good. As blasphemous as part of your premise is, it's certainly an admirable one, one befitting a true hero." Stain's gaze narrowed even more, and his bloodthirsty smile returned. "That is if you truly are one," he finished with a flick of a knife to the downed native. Izuku flashed yellow and was in front of the knife in less than a second, snatching it out of the air and throwing it back at Stain. Unfortunately, Stain wasn't there any longer, as the attack on native was a distraction to get him away from Iida. Before Stain could gleefully impale the boy with his sword, Izuku flashed a bright orange, and a wall appeared between the murderer and the hero in training. Izuku seized control of the barrier before Stain could make sense of it, and he made it curl around the man before slamming it into the wall of the alley. Quickly returning to yellow, he grabbed native and deposited him on the ground next to Iida, and he protectively stood over the two as Stain moved to attack once more. Izuku met his charge head-on and ducked the swipe of his sword before springing onto his hands and mule-kicking Stain in the head before he could turn to face him. Stain weaponized the force of the kick to quickly grab one of his holstered blades and swipe again at Izuku, but the boy twisted in the air to avoid the blade's edge and gave Stain another kick to the head for his troubles, sending the man to the ground. Stain's foot narrowly sailed past Izuku's face in a last-ditch effort to get some offense in on his way to the ground, and Izuku ignited in an emerald blaze before grabbing Stain's leg and slamming him into the other wall of the alley. Izuku went for a final punch to knock the man out, but he just barely escaped the blow and created space between them. Izuku shook off the fist-sized dent he created in the building, and he caught Stain's eye just in time to see him stroke the spikes in his boot and lick his finger. Immediately, Izuku froze, and he collapsed to the ground full of panic. "Shit," Izuku growled out as the man slowly meandered past him. "That was a stellar effort, kid," Stain complimented with a keen eye on the boy. "Your instincts and technique are solid, but you are at a major disadvantage in experience. That'll be fixed with time, though, but it won't be enough today. There are countless false heroes around here that are all talk, but you're different," he continued as he stepped toward the downed duo at the other end of the alley. "You stuck your neck out to save the lives of these two potentially at the cost of your own, and you didn't prioritize the life of your friend over the life of a stranger. You're worthy of staying alive, unlike these two." Stain leveled his blade at the head of the petrified Iida, and Izuku's heart sank further and further with every second. He slipped up and got nicked. He was stuck, and Iida was going to die. Iida was going to die. He couldn't save him. Just as Stain lifted his sword to end the boy, a powerful stream of fire blasted in his direction, forcing him to move out of the way to avoid becoming a human-sized piece of toast. The sight of fire shocked all three paralyzed bodies, but the recognition that came afterward filled Izuku with unbridled glee. "Sorry if I was a little late, Midoriya, but I got here as quickly as I could," came the aloof voice of Izuku's newest friend. "Shoto," Izuku cheered. "Holy shit, dude, perfect timing." "You, too, Todoroki?" Iida asked in further dismay. His classmates and comrades were involving themselves in his battle, and they would get hurt or worse in the process. "Just sending the location would have been cryptic enough to tell me that something was wrong since you don't do cryptic," Shoto began. "But the message you attached was pretty concise, if only poorly spelled. Iida in trouble, being a dumbass, send help." Natives snorted at the message while still paralyzed on the ground, and even Stain almost cracked a smirk despite himself. Iida, meanwhile, could only silently grumble. Shoto stomped on the ground, and a large ramp of ice developed in front of him. Stain leaped into the air to get away from it, but the real goal was to get Izuku away from the hero killer and slide him back to their position. "Shoto, don't let him cut you," Izuku warned. "He paralyzes his opponents with a taste of their blood." "So, he ingests blood to keep them from moving," Shoto confirmed as he readied for battle. "All I've got to do is keep my dist." He was interrupted by a blade slicing through the air and cutting him on his left cheekbone. "Much easier said than done," Izuku shouted. "Save the commentary," Shoto shouted back as a wall of ice sprouted up to block Stain's sudden advance. Stain leaped over the ice to lick the cut on Shoto's cheek, but he flared his flames to force Stain to back away. Meanwhile, Izuku began to regain feeling in his limbs. "Just stop it," Iida ground out. "Why are you both doing this? His fight is with me. I inherited my brother's name. I'm the one that should stop him. The hero killer is mine." "You're ingenium now? Strange," Shoto remarked a bit sardonically while creating sharp, jagged walls of ice to keep Stain at bay. "The ingenium I knew before never had such a hateful, vengeful look about him. Reminds me of myself." "Don't block your own field of vision against a superior opponent," Stain scolded, and he threw two blades at Shoto's left arm to prevent him from using his fire. Taking advantage of the momentary lapse, Stain made to impale the prone native, but he was intercepted by a speeding Izuku and dragged across the wall further down the alley. "Midoriya," Shoto exclaimed. Izuku grabbed Stain by the scarf and threw him to the ground in line for Shoto to attempt to freeze him with his ice, but the elusive murderer escaped the line of fire just in the nick of time. "Got him, Nit. He's too fast," Shoto bitterly grunted. "How did you break out of his quirk, anyway? Is there a time limit?" "I have a few theories, but it's irrelevant for right now," Izuku replied in a crouch beside him. "You're right that he's too fast and too slippery. Getting those two out of here unscathed is next to impossible." "Not if I provide a distraction for you to go," Shoto proposed. "You're fast enough to get them both out to safety while I keep him busy." "I'm not leaving you behind, Shoto," Izuku immediately shot down with deadly seriousness. "It might just be our only option," Shoto stood firm. "Then we'll make another," Izuku stated with finality. "If we have to wait it out for his quirk to wear off so that those two can escape on their own power, so be it. But I'm not leaving you to go down alone. If we go down, we're going down as friends." "This isn't the time for a damn speech, Midoriya," Shoto countered, but the faintest smile showed itself on his face. "Why are you two doing this?" Iida practically bawled. "This is my crusade. Don't kill yourselves for my sake." "Doing stupid things for the right reasons is the essence of being a hero," Izuku argued to his downed friend. "It's what we're all training to be, and I'm for damn sure not going to go back on that when someone I care about is in danger." He glanced up at Shoto. "You've lost a lot of blood as it is, so I'm going to distract him up close while you support me from behind. Sound good?" "It's pretty risky, but we can do it," Shoto acquiesced. "We can protect them." Your dedication to saving lives is beautiful, Stain commended in a bittersweet tone. The future may just be in capable hands if the both of you are any indication. But my mission still must be carried out, and those fakes will be purged. Iida could only watch in utter dismay as Izuku went up in yellow flames once again and began bouncing around Stain like a pinball. The boy dodged a symphony of blades in his efforts to keep Stain occupied, but the man would dodge the surprise attacks of Shoto just the same, and the effective stalemate drew on. I can't watch this, Iida nearly sobbed. You want to make your brother proud, Iida. Shoto intensely regarded the inconsolable boy while he blasted the alley with an inferno that Stain still weaseled his way out of. Then stand up and be ingenium. Be the hero he wants you to be. Iida choked back his tears once again. How pathetic. Can I even call myself a hero? My friends are risking their lives to protect me. The tears finally began to fall. Manuel was right. I lost myself in my vengeance and almost lost everything. I refuse. Iida began to stir. I refuse to let my friends suffer for my mistakes. I will do right by them and my brother. Meanwhile, the exhaustion was starting to hit both Izuku and Shoto. Izuku was moving non-stop to keep out of Stain's range, and he couldn't afford to stop for even a moment to let the orange barriers rise because it would leave Shoto exposed should he miss with his ice or fire. Shoto, meanwhile, was pouring his energy into these attacks that mostly ended up being fruitless. He was running out of steam, and he had greatly underestimated just how long it would take help to arrive. When Izuku was just a half step too slow, the butt of a blade slammed into his chest, and he was sent tumbling to the floor and away from Stain. Stain used that moment to make for Shoto, expertly weaving through the ice and fire as if with practiced ease. Izuku scrambled to his feet to chase after him, but Stain had already gotten into Shoto's guard with his sword ready to draw the boy's blood. Recipro burst. All Stain saw was a suit of armor literally blast into his field of vision and slam into him, launching him backward and breaking his sword in the process. Hell yeah, Iida, Izuku cheered as he launched himself over Stain and landed beside his two friends with a pant. Todoroki, Midoriya, this has nothing to do with either of you, and I apologize for all of this, he began. Iida, don't, Izuku started, but was cut off. No, I'm okay, he assured. I won't let the two of you shed any more blood for me. Stain only scoffed. There's no use trying to pretend you're a hero now. A person's true nature doesn't change in only a few minutes. Genuine question. Have you ever actually given people the chance to change? Izuku cut in. The question seemed to rattle Stain a bit, and he took a moment to collect his thoughts with a scowl. What's the point? Frauds that prioritize their own desires are rotten to the core. They are who they are, and that is immutable. They're the sickness that's infected our society and tarnished the name of heroes. I suppose I can understand that rationale for grown adults, Izuku carefully phrased, but you're condemning a teenager with room to grow and develop to the same sort of judgment. What difference does it make? Stain hotly retorted. A fake in youth is a fake as an adult. The only difference is that the fake can do more damage as an adult. Culling the fake when he's young prevents that damage from happening in the future. But you don't know that, Izuku argued back. You're not Sir Nightai. You can't see the future. You don't know how a teenager will end up only with knowledge of where they are currently. I've personally seen the results of teenagers taking long looks at their choices and making changes for the better. People have the capacity to change for the better if you just let them, Stain. Meanwhile, Native, who was still paralyzed in Stain's quirk, was gawking at the scene in bemusement and incredulity, and that only grew when he saw that neither of the other two teens were batting an eye or lifting a finger. What is that kid doing? He asked the other two in a semi-hushed tone to avoid drawing the attention of the hero killer. But it was unnecessary since the man's attention was solely focused on Izuku. Why is he arguing philosophy with the hero killer? Why haven't you three just left already? He's buying us time to recover, Shoto responded. He knows that a reciprocal burst like that takes a lot out of Ida's engines, and both he and I are nearing our limits. We were able to grasp that Stain enjoys monologuing, so drawing him into a frivolous debate is his way of letting us regain ourselves and kill time for help to arrive. Just as he finished, a bright yellow blur tackled the two out of the way of several swords, and the three with native literally in tow jumped backward to create more space. I might have agitated him a little bit, Izuku sheepishly admitted. I've entertained this for far too long. The murderer practically seethed. I will slaughter those two fakes, and that is final. The hero killer launched himself at the trio with a vicious sort of reckless abandon, and it made him more dangerous while also more predictable. The desperation he was feeling to kill Iida and Native before help arrived was mounting alongside the impotent rage he felt at having his ideals challenged so blatantly by someone he refused to kill. Shoto bathed the alley in fire while freezing Iida's leg to cool down his engines for another go, and Izuku met Stain blow for blow to keep him busy all the while. The mixture of red-hot fire from Shoto and a colorful ignition from Izuku chased Stain up a wall to escape the onslaught. "Recipro extend," Iida shouted once his engines were back online, and he rocketed up the wall with Izuku on the other side to pincer the cornered villain. A boosted kick from the armored boy and an iridescent fist wreathed in emerald fire slammed into either side of Stain's face, sandwiching the man between two thunderous blows and ripping consciousness away from him. A well-timed blast of ice from Shoto created a safe slide to the ground for the two boys and an icy prison for the defeated hero killer. The three teens were silent as they looked up at the captured villain. Izuku sidled over to stand in between the two, and he simultaneously offered the two a fist. It was an awkward moment at first, but Shoto quickly met Izuku's fist with his own. Iida, meanwhile, stared down at the offered fist, and he couldn't help but feel unworthy of the boy's friendship. His turmoil must have shown on his face, though, and he soon felt a firm, gloved hand pat him on the back. Iida met Izuku's eyes, and the kind, friendly smile free of any judgment invaded his will, and brought his fist to meet Izuku's. "We go down as friends, right?" Izuku asked. "We go down as friends," Shoto answered. "To the depths of hell," Iida added. Joke was not the least bit happy. When she got Izuku's message with his location, she made a mad dash for whatever back alley he may have potentially found trouble in. Then, she found herself getting smacked into a building by a hulking monster with scarred, black skin and an exposed brain. That wasn't very fun. Climbing her way out of the wreckage left by the new, stronger Nomu was a task, as she could certainly feel that at least one rib was broken. She got to her feet in time to see Endeavor make it to the scene and incinerate the creature's head. But the situation only marginally improved since there was also a winged Nomu flying around with a hostage. While Endeavor went to take care of the creature, she slipped away from the crowd and hobbled through the alleys of Hasu as best as she could. City on fire or not, she was going to find her intern. Not only had he truly grown on her, but he was brimming with potential that she wholeheartedly refused to see be wasted by some idealistic lunatic. It took a good bit of time and a fair amount of willpower to fight through the pain of traversing the city on foot with a broken rib. But she eventually found her beloved intern practically hanging off the shoulders of two other teens. One she immediately recognized as Endeavor's son, and the other she slowly recognized as the Iida boy from the sports festival. Then, her gaze traveled to the smiling man next to them, who she remembered to be native. Finally, her gaze landed on the beaten, tied-up form of... "Is that the hero killer?" The eyes of the three teens and native shot up to see a frantic and rightfully apoplectic Miss Joke storming towards them. More specifically, she was storming toward an incredibly pale Izuku. "Hey, Miss Joke," Izuku weakly began in an attempt to placate the angry hero. "Don't hate me, Beacon," she retorted. "Do you have any idea how worried I was? You up and ran off to go rescue someone from the hero killer himself without help. You could have been killed." Izuku could only shrink at his mentor's scolding since it wasn't at all inaccurate. Excuse me, joke, Native spoke up, gaining the irate woman's attention. Had he not done so, 2 people would be dead, myself included. What he did was idiotic, but he definitely saved lives today. Joke stared at him, then she stared at Izuku's sheepish grin, and then she stared at the bound and defeated hero killer. She sighed, and that was a mistake because it immediately reminded her about her injured ribs. Izuku saw this and quickly made his way over to her. Joke, are you okay? He fretted, and a pink flame bloomed in his hands before he placed them over the area she was clearly favoring. Here, let me. I'm okay, she tried to assure, but he wasn't convinced and applied his flames to her regardless. Ran into another one of those nomu on the way, so much stronger than the first. The mention of nomu got Todoroki's attention, as the only other nomu he knew of was the creature from the Usch that All Might fought. Could the League of Villains been behind the attack? Was Stain a part of the League as well? Iida, meanwhile, was staring wide-eyed at Izuku's pink flames. He was casually mending his mentor's ribs with apparently little issue, even though he was already exhausted. He had completely forgotten about his ability to heal. Maybe. No, he could never request that of him. It's out of line, even for a friend, and there's no guarantee that he even could. But maybe it wouldn't hurt to inquire later on. Ha! Look at the pompous dweeb. Tamira cackled at the scene beside Kurogiri from atop a building. And player 2 took him down at that. Even better. No idea why Spinner is so obsessed with him. Is it wise to stand so close to the heroes in your condition? Kurogiri asked. We risk being spotted if we're in view, and you're still in no condition to fight. It'll be fine, Tamira assured. You'll have us out of here before anyone that spots us could even get up here. As for my condition. His gaze lingered on Izuku's pink flames, and he seemed to be considering something. Kurogiri silently watched on as the young man cupped his chin and nodded. Well, we do need a healer, after all. The two watched the other pros that were fighting the nomu arrive at the scene, and they began tending to the roughed-up hero brats, while Stain was watched like a hawk. Tamira admittedly started to get a little bored, and he was thinking about calling it quits and leaving with the remaining nomu. But, as if it was summoned with a thought, the winged nomu flew around the corner and into the fray. It attempted to yoink a hostage, but it only succeeded in spilling some of its blood in the area without nabbing anyone. The assembled heroes tensed and readied to battle, and, as a result, they took their attention away from Stain. The hero killer capitalized on this and escaped his bondage with a knife that he had stashed away, and the little weirdo licked the spilled blood to paralyze the nomu. What the hell is he doing? Tamira growled as Stain went into another monologue about purging the fakes and degenerate criminals. His eyes widened when Stain killed the nomu, and he inexplicably turned his gaze up to the two on top of the building. It seems that he is aware of our presence, Kurogiri dryly commented. The hell was your first clue? Tamira snarked. Then, things became interesting when Endeavor came onto the scene and locked eyes with Stain. The air around the parties on the ground completely changed, and Stain began emanating the most vicious and intense aura that anyone on the street had ever felt. Even the two atop the building were taken by surprise, as the sheer violent presence Stain permeated was only eclipsed by their sensei. A thought occurred to Tamira, and he turned to his misty companion. How close can you get us without being seen? Tamira asked more seriously than Kurogiri could remember him ever being. Close enough to hear them, he answered. Good, he responded, and the two stepped through a portal that Kurogiri spawned. On the other side, Tamira quickly fished out his phone and started recording Stain's impassioned final stand. You false heroes, I'll make this right. These streets must run with the blood of hypocrites. Hero, I will reclaim that word. Come on, just try and stop me, you fakes. There are only 3 that I'd let kill me, 3 true heroes. All Might is worthy, and so are those 2. Tamira lingered on the teens in question for a long moment before ending the recording when Stain finally succumbed to his injuries. We've got what we needed. Let's go. What is this for, if I may ask? Kurogiri questioned when they returned to their place on the roof of the building overlooking the scene. I'm sending it to Spinner and getting him to make a manifesto out of it, Tamura bitterly answered. But don't you hate Stain? Why would you intentionally do anything to aid his cause? Kurogiri asked with clear confusion in his voice. We attacked Hasu with Nomus while Stain was also in the city, he lowly began. As much as it kills me, people will assume that Stain and the League are allied after tonight. Might as well take advantage of that and create some strong fanatics for our own cause. And if this little display sows discord among hero society by giving two Yua brats the hero killer's own stamp of approval, all the better. That is surprisingly forward-thinking of you, Tamura, Kurogiri responded. I'm not an idiot, Kurogiri, no matter how much Sensei seems to think I am, Tamura answered with an unreadable tone. Kurogiri did not respond to that, and the two left through a portal back to the bar. The next morning, the three teens were in the hospital and still processing all that had happened. They weren't terribly injured, but the heroes on scene took the precaution anyway, and Izuku didn't really have the energy to heal their injuries after doing what he could for Joke's ribs. So, the little rascals are awake, came a voice familiar to Izuku when their door slid open. Standing in the doorway was a nonplussed Manual in his hero suit and a slightly more joyful Miss Joke in her own hospital gown. Joke, Izuku welcomed with a smile that was gladly returned. And Manual, too, Iida spoke while wilting slightly under Manual's blank gaze. I'm deeply sorry for the trouble I caused you. Save it for now, Manual interrupted. Someone is here to see the three of you. In stepped a giant of a man with the head of a dog in a clean, black suit with a white, spotted tie in the style of a Dalmatian's coat. This is Hasu's chief of police, Joke introduced, losing her smile. Kenji Tsuragami. The three teens stood when he was introduced as the police chief, but he waved them off. So, woof, you are the U.S. students who brought down the hero killer? He asked in a voice that didn't quite fit his stature. We are, Shoto hesitantly confirmed. Stain has some severe injuries, the man began in a serious tone. Severe burns and many broken bones. You three did quite the number on him. The man's canine eyes bored into the trio as he went into a lengthy explanation about quirk use laws and the clear lines between licensed quirk use, self-defense, and vigilantism. Izuku wasn't really listening, in all honesty. The whole time, he was having a silent conversation with Miss Joke. He could tell that she was trying to implore him to say that she authorized him to use his quirk in the defense of the lives of others so that he wouldn't get into any trouble. She was willing to take the full brunt of the punishment for him, but he wouldn't stand for that, and she could tell if the way her eye twitched was any indication. Hold on a minute, Shoto heatedly spoke up, drawing Izuku and Miss Joke's attention back onto the discussion at hand. If Iida hadn't stepped in, then Native would have been murdered, and had Midoriya not done the same, then both Iida and Native would be dead. No one else had been able to locate the hero killer while he was in Hasu. Are you saying that we should have just stood by and watched people die? So, it's okay to break the law as long as it goes your way, the chief calmly retorted. Manual was pointedly silent at that, Iida noticed. But sir, isn't it a hero's job to protect people? Shoto argued back. This is why you're not full-fledged pros yet, the chief sighed. I see Yua and Endeavor haven't been teaching you nearly enough. What a shame. Shoto practically seethed at the dismissal, and he took an angry step forward. You damn moo. Gonna cut you off right there before you say something that would make Tsu upset. Shoto, Izuku interrupted, and Shoto's eyes went wide before he immediately recomposed himself and sat back down. Izuku turned his gaze back to the chief. If the alternative is lives being lost for the sake of bureaucracy, then I don't think we did anything wrong. I really don't think that's what's going on here. Joke quickly attempted to interject, but the chief decided to challenge the position. Isn't it? He questioned. Quirk use isn't only regulated situationally for a reason. I could throw your asses in the pound for this incident. With all due respect, Izuku started, I had the power and ability to save lives, and I did so, regardless of the laws. I get that these laws are in place for good reason, but if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing, and I wouldn't begrudge anyone else for doing the same. That's a really slippery slope, the chief responded. That line of thinking could easily lead to another distro sprouting up. That, he had to admit, was a good point. Unregulated quirk use was a slippery slope, and it was the foundation of distro's entire ideology. Still, laws that explicitly prevented unlicensed people from publicly wielding their quirks to defend themselves and others at risk of felony vigilantism charges were very often overly restrictive. However, where would that line even be drawn to determine what is and isn't suitable? It doesn't particularly matter either way. I'm not here to punish you as it is, the chief finally revealed, breaking Izuku from his thoughts. What I said is only the official stance of the police department. Any punishment would only be necessary if this went public. If it did, you'd no doubt be applauded by the populace, but there's no chance of avoiding the consequences of vigilantism. On the other hand, we could say that Endeavor saved the day, and Stain's injuries would be consistent with that, but you wouldn't get any credit. Woof. The large dog man removed his hands from his pockets and held them out like a scale. You can either take the acclaim alongside the punishment, or you can skirt the punishment at the cost of the acclaim. It's up to you. The three teens looked at each other in silent deliberation. It took them all of 5 seconds. Option 2 was the simultaneous answer of the three. Excellent, the chief said with a thumbs up. I'd rather not damage any promising careers over something like this. Iida stepped forward and bowed before Manuel. I'm sorry, sir. You were right about everything. I should have listened. I should have heeded your warning. You're right, you should have, Manuel said with a sigh. You're lucky to even be standing here right now, but I'd be a hypocrite if I begrudged you too badly. Just don't do anything like this again in the future. Allow me, on behalf of the police department, to thank you all for your efforts, the chief finished with a low bow. A vicious killer was apprehended, and it is thanks to you. Any prepared reply was halted when a figure smashed through the window and rolled into the room. What concerned them was that they were on the 5th floor of the hospital. What concerned them even more was that the figure revealed herself to be the rabbit hero, Mirko. You, she pointed at Izuku with a heated glare. You move-stealing sack of shit, I've been looking everywhere for you. That foreboding feeling he had during the sports festival and periodically afterward finally made sense. We're gonna spar since you think you're such hot shit to butcher my moves like that, and you'll get first-hand experience in what they feel like when done properly, she declared and grabbed the frightened teen by his collar. Then she leveled a glare at him as Joke, who had instinctively stepped up to defend him. He your intern? Bring his suit. With no further preamble, she jumped out of the hole she created with the frightened Izuku in her grasp. The remaining occupants, chief of police included, were positively slack-jawed at what they had just seen, and Miss Joke only sighed in resignation before collecting his costume and leaving. Just then, a giant reptilian peered through the broken window. Sorry about that, the gruff voice of Rukiu in her dragon form intoned. I didn't expect her to literally bust through the window when she asked for a ride this morning. I'll pay for the damages. Dabi was steaming more so than usual. A crushed phone laid discarded on the ground and burning a bright blue while the man in question stormed out of the derelict apartment he was squatting in. Stain's endorsement of heroes didn't really matter to him. That wasn't why he was upset. He believed in Stain's mission to destroy hero society and admired his conviction to see it through. But he didn't particularly care for Stain's apparent desire to build a better one in its place. What truly upset him was just who the man was endorsing. It triggered such a violent reaction in him that he annihilated the phone he was using in less than a second. He'd have to steal another one off of a fresh corpse at some point, but that could come later. He needed to blow off some steam for the moment. True heroes, he scoffed. What a joke. Bad enough for that disingenuous little cumrag to be worthy, but that bastard's little masterpiece, too. Dabi's flames unconsciously ignited on his body in a huff, and he spat on the ground. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll kill them both and drag that bastard, Endeavor, to hell with us in one glorious inferno. Dabi stopped when he turned down an alley and spotted a homeless man huddled on a makeshift cot. What specifically drew his attention was the soft, blue light enveloping the man's scraggly face. He dully gazed at the man scrolling through the device with a carefree countenance, as if that moment was one of the few moments in which he could forget the daily rigmarole and just enjoy some peace. Well, it appeared Dabi found a new phone. I gotta hand it to you, Spinner. You did some good work with this, Tamura acknowledged as he and Spinner watched the video that the Gecko Man created upon his friend's request. The bar was empty as usual aside from Kurogiri occupying his usual spot behind the counter. The purple-haired reptilian grinned. Took me 6 hours in total to make, but I like how it came out. People seem to like it, too. I don't even have to keep re-uploading it when it gets taken down anymore because so many others do it themselves. Good, Tamura declared. People are talking about it more than the government would like. The news reported that Endeavor took Stain down, but that's bullshit, and this video paints a different picture, so now millions are questioning it, too. This age of suppression that society has existed in is finally coming back to bite them. Spinner smiled. It was nice to see his occasional gaming buddy be passionate about something in his own special way. It was a reprieve from the usual omnicidal nihilism that was rather unhealthy in the Gecko Man's opinion. So, what's the end game? For right now, we wait, Tamura answered. I've got our broker on the lookout for any competent people looking to join up with something bigger. No more mooks, only mini-bosses. When the League is at full strength, then we'll move on to the next phase of the plan. So, that means, yes, you're officially part of the League. Right on. Can I be an underboss? This isn't the Yakuza, Spinner. All for One was listening in on the conversation in delight conflicting with uncertainty. Hearing Tamura clearly plan out his moves and firmly take action outside of his own direction brought a wicked smile to the scarred supervillain. The push he gave the young man had paid off in spades since he seemed to do a 180 from his previous childishness into a man much more befitting of succeeding his empire. However, the suddenness of the change slightly unsettled him. He had been around for 2 centuries, so he was well aware of how easily a house of cards could be knocked down, as he had been the very breeze that knocked plenty of them down in the past. He'd be sure to keep a close watch on his protege and be there to pick him back up when he inevitably failed. Rikiya Yatsubashi truly enjoyed his office in Deka. The view of the glorious city inhabited by his loyal forces working tirelessly to prepare for their ultimate mission filled him with such indomitable pride. The wide, self-assured smile adorning his mildly wrinkled face only brightened when he received a call from one of his lieutenants out in the field. Turning away from the window, he strode to his desk and reached past the taxidermy of the teal platypus to answer the call. Curious, it's good to hear from you. I assume your mission is going well. I'd like to say so, Grand Commander, but it's unfortunately hitting a few roadblocks, some much more interesting than others. His smile dimmed somewhat. Oh, what would those be? Most notably is the hero killer. I'm certain you've heard of the news and videos surrounding him and his capture a few days ago. I have. Well, the official story is that he was apprehended by the number 2 hero, and that satisfied many who elected not to look any further. However, the sort of manifesto that was released after his capture, presumably by a devoted fan of his, included video of his final moments just before being apprehended. How they got that footage when it doesn't seem to exist anywhere else, I'm not exactly sure, but a great deal of focus was placed on our very own person of interest. I'm aware of that much. What kind of stir is this causing? Predictably, the media and police are tight-lipped about that specific detail, only deigning to dissect Stain's philosophy instead. The hornet's nest has already been kicked, though. I contacted a few of our remaining cells around the nation, and the prevailing sentiment is one of discontent. People on the dregs of society have taken note of the discrepancies in reporting and what was actually posted, and many more are feeling emboldened by Stain's tenacity and are seeking to strike it on a bigger stage. The most likely avenue for that would be the League of Villains that Stain was reportedly connected to in some capacity, but many could be swayed to our own cause as well. His countenance became a thoughtful one. That is very interesting indeed. Many people only turn to villainy as an escape due to being outcasts with few options at their disposal thanks to our current society. That discontent can be appropriately weaponized and refocused onto more conducive targets. We could certainly bolster our ranks from this, but I feel the bigger fish to keep an eye on is the League itself. Why is that, Grand Commander? He sighed. Even with Stain's influence, I fear that they may just end up being a group of hoodlums with no greater goal beyond wanton destruction. However, I have a plan for that. For right now, I'm assuming you already have a plan in place for how this development with the hero killer looks for the rat at Yua. I certainly do, and it's already in motion. His grin returned. Excellent. Keep up the good work. We'll make contact again with any major developments. As you command, Redistro. The days since the battle with Stain and his subsequent kidnapping from the hospital were a mixed bag for Izuku. On one hand, he was ripped from safety and thrust into days of seemingly non-stop battle with the rabbit hero herself, and Izuku seriously suspected that she just did not know the definition of holding back. Then again, his bones were not completely ground to dust by the end of each battle, so maybe she did. On the other hand, he got to spar with the freaking rabbit hero herself at her own insistence. Mirko was one of his favorite heroes and one of the premier active pros in pure strength and combat prowess. He relished every second that he was thrashed into the ground by the incensed pro, and he took to heart every comment, offhand suggestion, and mostly constructive insult she hurled at him along the way. Mirko, likewise, was having fun beating the snot out of Izuku. Not only was she getting it back in blood for him biting one of her techniques on live television and screwing up the name at that, but he was also taking the punishment and steamrolling ahead like a champ. She would even go as far to say that he was a decent fighter. His technique was solid but could use a little work, and his kicks were woefully dismal in comparison to her own, but he had great instincts and could dodge like nobody's business. Their most recent spar proved incredibly fruitful for the both of them. Battling in one of the Ketsubutsu training grounds that was fashioned to simulate a quarry, the two had all the space they needed to unload the breadth of their power onto each other. Izuku had slowly grown more able to track her movements and read her attacks. Therefore, he found himself expending less energy on dodging and instead deflecting more of her offense than he was initially. It usually came in the form of Izuku tanking her less brutal punches while bathed in green fire, and over the course of the spars they had, he found that doing so greatly improved his durability. Any strikes, usually kicks, that he couldn't safely tank were blocked with his orange barriers, not only helping him consciously draw them out and doing so quickly, but also testing and improving the strength of those barriers once he erected them. It only took a single kick from the rabbit hero to smash through them like glass at first, but with time and added concentration to make them even sturdier, they were able to withstand 2 kicks. For the most part, he used the barriers to momentarily stall her offense while he readied a quick and hard-hitting counter. Miss Joke, meanwhile, was not having a great time. Her student had effectively been absconded by a rabid battle junkie with a bone to pick with a teenager that imitated one of her ultimate moves. She probably should have been more upset about the situation than she actually was, but the boy was getting some fantastic sparring in with an opponent that could match and exceed him in a safe setting, so she couldn't complain too much. Rukyu was also kind enough to give them all a lift back to Ketsubutsu to use their training grounds for Mirko's retribution. She managed to escape the Hasu situation with a slap on the wrist given her intern's refusal to pass the buck onto her, which both warmed her heart and annoyed her to no end. But she suspected that her life and the life of her intern were not going to be simple going forward. The way in which the Hero Commission representative who showed up to her apartment was cagey about how the situation would affect Izuku in the future put her on guard, and she had a feeling that she needed to keep an eye out for the boy. There was something going on that she obviously wasn't privy to, and that made her anxious, especially if the Hero Commission was involved in any capacity. Presently, she was presiding over the spar between her student and Japan's current No. 6 hero. She felt the ground minutely shake when the two rabid combatants collided fists and launched into a lightning-fast exchange of blows that Mirko quickly got the better of. He bore the brunt of several hard punches to his abdomen before an orange wall appeared to his side in the blink of an eye to block a kick aimed for his ribs. He capitalized with a stiff shot to her nose and tried to press the advantage until she snatched his arm and slammed him onto his back. Only he kipped up right afterward just for them to leap into the same song and dance. The gulf in raw strength and experience was readily apparent, but Izuku was doing his very best to keep in the fight, and he wasn't doing a bad job for that matter. Then, Mirko turned up the intensity and really started going at him. The grin she sported was indication enough of her enjoyment, and Miss Joke could only pray that Izuku didn't develop any kind of battle lust of his own. Mirko's strikes became even more vicious and practically had trails of fire following her fists and feet. Meanwhile, Izuku was starting to struggle mightily to dodge and defend. Any attempt to dart away in a yellow flash was in vain, as Mirko would be right back on him in a matter of moments. Eventually, she caught him with a stiff uppercut to his stomach, and in one swift motion, she pivoted and slammed him to the ground behind her. There was no reprieve to speak of for Izuku because she immediately leaped into the air and prepared an axe kick. "This is how it's done, kid," she shouted with a feral grin, and Izuku felt his pants become slightly heavier before the area around him erupted into orange. "Luna Arc," Mirko shouted and shattered through an orange dome with her kick. Then she smashed through another dome under it. Then a third dome met the same fate. It was after 5 such domes that she finally cut through most of the layers to reach Izuku protected by one last barrier. But her instincts screamed at her to jump, so she did just that and nearly missed the purple spikes that shot out of the remaining dome. "The F," she called out, and she only received a shrug from Miss Joke when she looked over to her. The last dome came down, and Izuku was wreathed in a mixture of orange and purple fire. Judging from his face, he was just as surprised as the 2 women in the training grounds with him. "You've never used that color, have you, Beacon?" Miss Joke asked. "No," he answered, staring at the purple spikes that were slowly shrinking and losing form on his arm. "I hypothesized that I had access to it, but I've never gotten around to figuring out what it did." "Nearly skewered me, you thieving bastard," Mirko grumbled before smirking. "Let's do it again." "Not until we figure out just what it does," Joke intervened before turning back to Izuku. "Try to play around with it and see what comes out." Izuku nodded and examined the purple flames on his body that had mostly overtaken the orange by that point. He extended his arm and concentrated, and just as before, the purple flames took shape and hardened into spikes. "Holy hell," he remarked. In an attempt to see if he could will them to do anything else, he imagined the tips of the spikes dulling into rounder surfaces, and to his surprise, they did just that. "So you can control what you create," Miss Joke commented with a thoughtful nod. "How about the range?" Izuku peered down at the rounded spikes, and his thoughts traveled back to what he saw of Shiozaki's vines during the sports festival and the way she was able to easily ensnare and subdue her opponents from a distance. Deciding it was worth a shot, he extended his arm, and the dulled spikes thinned into ropes and shot out of his arm. He kept them going until they reached roughly 20 meters, and his concentration strained enough for his control to slip and the ropes to disperse. "Oh, wow," Joke marveled, and Izuku was also preening. Izuku summoned the purple vines once again, and they wrapped themselves around his right arm and fashioned into a deep purple sword in his hand. With wide eyes, he slowly held up his left arm, and the purple flames brightened into orange before flattening out into a shield covering his forearm and hand. "A literal sword and shield," Joke observed with a proud smile. "Orange for defense and purple for offense, and they function very similarly as far as how I control them," Izuku commented. "I don't know what the specific limits of the purple flames are as of yet, but it seems like I can create any object that I could wield or fit onto my arm." I expected something cooler," Mirko shrugged, and then her wicked grin returned with a pound of her fist into her palm. "Still, though, this has been fun. We'll make this a regular thing so I can whip your ass into shape." Izuku did not know if he should have felt excitement or fear. He settled on both. At week's end, the mentor-intern duo was standing in front of the gates of Ketsubutsu to see Izuku off from his internship. Joke waded through the sea of profuse gratitude he offered for taking the time to teach him, and she silenced him with a pat on the shoulder. "You don't need to thank me, Beacon," she kindly assured. "Run-ins with serial killers and serial fighters aside, having you as an intern was a dream. You're going to do spectacular things as a hero. I'm sure of that." Izuku's smile was blinding, and she met his with a grin and thumbs up before something occurred to her. "Oh, before I forget, some of the kids from the VRP wanted to keep in touch with you, so I gave them your number. Figured you wouldn't mind." "They did?" Izuku asked a little flummoxed as to why they would want to. "Absolutely," she emphatically confirmed. "You sat down and took the time to actually listen to them and be there for them. That's, unfortunately, pretty rare out in the real world." Izuku was visibly perturbed upon hearing that, and he nodded with an expression that was probably more serious than necessary. "That'll change, then. I'll make sure of it. I won't fail them." Joke couldn't fight the snort that left her, and she amusedly shook her head. "So serious when it comes to helping people. Hold on to that passion. The world needs more of it." "I will," he promised before setting off in the direction of the nearest train station. Joke watched him leave with a bright smile, but that smile slowly diminished as he drew further away, and a frown took form in its place. When she initially texted Aizawa about the situation, everything from the Stain debacle to Mirko potentially stealing his student for spars in the future, he responded in no time flat that Nezu would be made aware. That response did nothing to calm the restlessness she felt in her gut, as it would likely only draw her into Nezu's Cold War with the HPSC. With a sigh, she turned around to head back through her school's gates. She didn't like what was potentially on the horizon. However, she'd be ready for whatever came. The HPSC had been an unfortunate fixture in hero society for a long time, and she'd be lying if she said that society didn't rely on the Commission's existence way more than it probably should. If they truly had Izuku Midoriya in their sights, then the likelihood that Nezu would plunge the nation into chaos in order to protect him was non-zero. She knew which side she was on if that happened. Izuku leaned back into his seat on the train with a frown. He hadn't spent a ton of time online since returning to Ketsubutsu after the encounter with Stain, so he didn't see much of the news coverage of the event. He had taken the chief at his word that Endeavor was credited with Stain's capture. So, understandably, the text he received from Yui was more than a little concerning. "When were you going to tell me that you fought the hero killer, and why the hell did you fight the hero killer?" Izuku stared at that message for 5 minutes, and in that time, a few more texts came from some of his classmates. The fact that she was asking that question meant that she knew he was in Hasu with Stain, so she already somehow knew more than what was officially reported. "How did you find out about that?" "Stain himself said that you and Todoroki were worthy. It's become a whole thing." Yui proceeded to send him a deluge of memes centered around himself and Shoto, some even calling them the worthy duo and Stain's chosen ones. Izuku didn't know how to feel about his near-death experience being memed, but he supposed it was just par for the course of being a hero. So, please explain. Let me preface this by saying that I did not go with the intent of fighting. My friend's brother was attacked and crippled by the hero killer, and he went after him to get revenge. I wasn't going to let him die a stupid, gruesome death, so I hunted them down myself. One of the greatest human beings I've ever met once told me that doing stupid things for the right reasons was the essence of being a hero, and it's a philosophy I've abided by since then. That wasn't an endorsement to throw yourself into harm's way at every opportunity. I didn't have many options at my disposal, but I'd do it all over again if given the opportunity. I'd do the same for you, too. You're a piece of shit, you know that. It is impossible to stay mad at you. And you love me for it. Shut up. I'm glad you're okay. That wasn't the only conversation of that nature he would have that day. Many of his classmates bombarded him with questions and concerns about his encounter with Stain, several of whom sent him the twisted manifesto that was posted shortly after Stain's arrest. The video certainly disturbed him, if only for how easily anyone could have gone down a similar route as Stain if they were in his position. Plenty of people become disillusioned with hero society, and many of them turn to crime and villainy. It just happened to be the case that most of those people weren't as dangerous as Stain, but that wasn't the case all of the time. He idly wondered how Shoto was dealing with it all. Endeavor and his youngest son quietly approached their considerably large home after Shoto's internship had officially concluded. They didn't speak much on the ride back from the Flame Heroes agency, and since Endeavor was present for Stain's declaration and was already privy to their battle prior to that, he hadn't asked many questions beyond assuring that his son never went out on his own to apprehend a dangerous criminal again. The Todoroki duo was surprised to see a man in a crisp, black suit waiting for them at their front door with a black briefcase in hand, though. The man was clean-shaven, his dark gray hair was neatly combed back, and he had a frigid air about him. Shoto did not recognize the man, but Endeavor's eyes narrowed dangerously when he set his sights upon him. Junji Mishima, Endeavor addressed suspiciously evenly in his son's opinion. I thought everything regarding Stain was squared away with the HPSC. Ah, the commission. Shoto's eyes narrowed as well, although his eyes narrowed for different reasons. The commission was notorious for encouraging people to stop asking questions about his home life whenever concerns about himself, his siblings, and his mother came up in the past. In Shoto's opinion, the League of Villains and the HPSC were lateral entities. Good evening to you, too, Mr. Todoroki, the now named Mishima spoke in a clipped tone. The initial issue was indeed handled. However, certain developments have complicated matters. Shoto did not like the way the man's cold gaze lingered on him towards the end of his sentence one bit. Apparently, his father did not, either. We will continue this discussion in my office, Endeavor firmly interposed, ending whatever line of thought that action was drumming up. You're dismissed, Shoto. The teen did not need to be told twice to vacate the area and head to his room post-haste. The first thing Izuku noticed when he walked through 1A's door with school back in session was that Bakugo looked haggard and paranoid. He cautiously approached the boy, and Bakugo's head snapped to look at him after only taking a few steps in his direction. Izuku was more than a little uneasy at the boy's wild stare, and he was about to awkwardly shuffle to his seat before the blonde finally spoke. How the hell did you survive 10 years with that devil? The two locked eyes, and in that singular moment, mutual understanding washed over them. They felt like they were really seeing each other for the first time in their lives. Izuku reached out and placed his hand on Bakugo's shoulder. Did you survive the dodge training? Izuku asked. I didn't have a choice, Bakugo muttered with a haunted expression. Every time she got me, she'd substitute whatever she was throwing with something harder or sharper for added incentive. She always got me. Izuku gave him an understanding nod. Look at it this way. Your situational awareness is probably impeccable now, although it is also possible that you'll just be really paranoid for the rest of your life. I can't really make a determination on that one just yet. Midoriya? Yaoyorozu hesitantly questioned from her desk. Is that an ankle monitor? Huh? He absent-mindedly responded before the question caught up with him, and he looked to his feet. Oh, yeah. After the whole thing with Stain, my mom put this on me to ensure I didn't wander into trouble again. The mention of Stain captured his classmates' attention, and they crowded around him, Shoto, and Iida to continue the third degree that had begun in the days prior. I can't believe you guys actually fought the hero killer. I'm just glad you all made it out alive, seriously. Why was Endeavor credited with his capture? Of all the questions that flew at the three, that one caught Izuku's interest. He turned to the person who asked, and he saw his tailed classmate, Ojiro, patiently waiting for an answer. I imagine that 3 hero students taking down a serial killer that had previously defeated dozens of licensed pros would hurt morale more than it would help it, Izuku replied, and the boy nodded in acceptance. And the whole unlicensed quirk use thing, Ochako supplied beside him. Oh, Ochako, how was in turning out in the sticks with the wild pussycats? Izuku asked. Ochako faced him with the blankest expression he had ever seen on her. I'm about 60% certain that Pixie Bob is a predator. Not a soul in the classroom could think up a proper response to that, and the resulting silence remained until their homeroom teacher finally entered the room. The day went on as normal, with the only real notable events being Bakugo's explosive reintroduction into heroics classes and the shitstorm that occurred in the locker room afterward. Hey, Midoriya, Minta called to him as everyone was changing out of their costumes and back into their uniforms. You won't believe the jackpot I just found. Someone Shawshanked a hole in this wall. A previous generation has given us a gift. It took Izuku a few seconds to grasp why Minta was so excited about the prospect of a hole in the wall, but some of the other guys were much quicker on the uptake. Don't even think about it, Iida commanded with his signature chops. Peeping on them like that would be criminal. Quite literally, Shoji muttered from the other side of the room. The short boy seemed to hesitate for a moment at that statement, but he regained his nerve and pressed on. Come on, aren't any of you even the slightest bit interested? Midoriya, don't you ever think about our obscenely beautiful classmates? Not particularly, no, Izuku dryly answered. Well, you'll have to lock me in solitary confinement for taking this plunge alone, Minta declared, but Iida slid his hand over the hole before he could attempt to peep through it. Absolutely not. This is not behavior becoming of a hero. Iida's rant stopped in its tracks when an earphone jack stabbed through his hand from the peephole, and his eyes alongside everyone else's went wide. Holy shit! Several of the boys collectively reacted, and Iida swiftly removed his hand from the wall as the jack retreated back through the hole, no doubt to an absolutely mortified Gyro. Izuku sprung into action and grabbed the punctured hand, lighting up in pink and bathing his friend's hand in the healing fire, while the peephole was quickly filled by a foamy substance from the other side. Within seconds, the wound closed up, and Iida's hand was completely fine. Dude, your quirk is so busted, Zero commented in awe. You don't know the half of it, Izuku sighed. Iida, meanwhile, was stock still when he saw the pink flames and how they completely reversed the damage on his hand. It sent him back to his earlier thoughts about his brother's condition and if he should ask Izuku for help. So wrapped up in his thoughts was he that he completely missed Minta being manhandled by the others and hogtied with tape over a bonfire Shoto created. Minta, Izuku began with a light application of blue flames to get the boys' undivided fear and attention, unknowingly drawing the attention of the dark, otherworldly entity that decided to watch along. Remember what I said at the USJ. I helped you at the entrance exam. Do not make me regret that. That kid scares me, Dark Shadow muttered to Takoyami when they briefly poked their head out to watch the unfolding mess. The kindest souls often have the darkest rage, Takoyami nodded. The hell does that even mean? Dark Shadow replied in exasperation. Upon the conclusion of the school day, Izuku was planning to find his mom and plead with her to remove the ankle monitor when he was stopped by a firm hand on his shoulder. Midoriya, do you have a moment? Asked a trepidatious Iida. Sure, he kindly replied. What's up? Iida hesitated, and Izuku could clearly see on the taller boy's face that he was warring internally with whatever was on his mind. He remained silent and allowed his friend to collect himself and gather his nerve. Your quirk, Iida began. You can heal with one aspect of it, correct? Yes, Izuku carefully confirmed. What sort of injuries have you healed in the past? Iida asked. You want me to heal your brother? It was a statement rather than a question. Iida's eyes widened, and he sputtered. I mean, Iida struggled until he slumped in defeat. Can you? Izuku did not immediately respond, instead cupping his chin and looking downward. Iida, justifiably emotional, interpreted this as hesitation to accept, and he hurriedly attempted damage control. Forgive me for even proposing such a selfish request. I shouldn't have asked that of you. You have no obligation to do anything at all for me after risking your life to save me. Probably. Iida stopped talking and looked intently at the shorter boy. What? Probably, yeah, Izuku continued with a nod. It may take a lot out of me, but provided I have a rough idea of what injuries I'm healing in the first place, I'll do what I can. I'll probably need to have a big meal beforehand, but if I'm just reconnecting a spine by the severed discs and mending the associated nerves, then checking for and handling any grievous bruising left behind from the attack, it shouldn't be too complicated. Not as complex as fixing All Might would be. Izuku clamped his mouth shut when he realized that he was rambling and nearly revealed All Might's secret to Iida. Fortunately, the boy in question had completely missed everything after Izuku confirmed that he could help his brother. You can help Tensei, Iida spoke in a near whisper as his emotions were beginning to get the better of him. I don't want to make you any promises, but I'll do whatever I can, Izuku answered with a nod. Iida's tears were free-flowing, and he practically fell to the ground in a bow to Izuku with his forehead pressed against the floor. Thank you so much, Midoriya. I am forever in your debt. No need to bow. I'm just doing what friends do, Izuku bashfully tried to deflect. Iida shakily nodded and returned to his feet. We can wait until after finals. I don't want to interrupt your preparations for the exams. No, if we put this off until after finals, it will literally be the only thing you'll think about, Izuku argued, and Iida had to concede the point. We'll get this done this week so that you aren't distracted. Iida did not think that he could become any more joyful, but that comment deftly proved him wrong and sent him over the moon. Before he could launch into another barrage of gratitude, a loud, familiar laugh echoed from around the corner. Young Midoriya, All Might boomed as he approached the teens, can we talk? Oh, Izuku stuttered and looked to Iida, and the boy quickly nodded and bid them farewell. Sure. Izuku followed the massive man into one of the teachers' lounges, and All Might deflated back into Toshinori before motioning for the boy to sit. I guess whatever it is must be important if we needed the privacy, Izuku ventured on the couch across from the gaunt man. But Toshinori merely chuckled and shook his head. Not really, he denied. I just didn't feel like blowing up for it. Oh, well, what's up? I was invited to the upcoming I-Expo and wondered if you wanted to tag along. Izuku's eyes practically shot out of his skull. Seriously? The I-Expo? On I-Island? The very same, Toshinori confirmed with a soft laugh at the boy's antics. I'd be honored. I-Island is where the world's most brilliant minds converge for quirk research and support item development. It's like a quirk scientist's wet dream. He speedily went on before his near-mutter spree halted, and he turned a curious eye to the skinny man. Why me? Don't get me wrong, I'm honored and would love to go, but I'd assume you have other choices to take with you before me. Toshinori looked away from the teen and tugged his collar. Well, funny story about that. I had a dream recently where Sensei was throttling me and ordering me to bond with her grandson. Izuku tried to hold back his laughter at the man's plight, but he failed, and the man sighed in defeat. I wouldn't be surprised if she's been cooking up a way to enter the physical realm, Toshinori joked. Well, we can ask her, Izuku offered. Toshinori looked at him quizzically until the teen's hand lit up in blue, and Izuku slowly pushed it toward the man. Izuku watched as a large, muscly hand in a black sleeve reached out of Toshinori until a yellow glove smacked the hand, and it retreated. Izuku reached for the gloved hand, and when they grabbed onto each other, the ethereal form of Nana that was only visible to Izuku slowly pulled herself from Toshinori. Something within him compelled him to intensify the flames, and when he did, Nana's gloved hand became much more vibrant, and Toshinori gasped. The man watched a painfully familiar glove manifest in the teen's hand, followed by the muscled arm, white cape, and long, black hair of his sensei. Holy hell, it worked, she exclaimed, and she slowly craned her head to look back at her former protege. Toshi. Sensei, the man whispered in utter shock. Meanwhile, Izuku was as white as a ghost and sweating bullets. He was trying to keep calm, but the frigid presence breathing down his neck and haunting whispers in his ear were making it very difficult for him. Nana's tearful half-embrace with Toshinori was interrupted when the grip on her hand became vice-like, and she turned to Izuku only to go pale herself. Hovering menacingly behind him was the horrifying visage of death itself in the form of a grinning, heterochromatic cat. Seeing the state her grandson was in, she turned back to Toshinori to confirm that he was seeing it too, but he looked at her and the boy in confusion. We'll have to cut this short, she hastily decided. Bond with him, or I'll spawn Sorahiko in your dreams for the rest of your life. With that, she pried her hand away from Izuku's and faded back into One for All. In an instant, the deathly presence vanished and Izuku collapsed onto the couch. Young Midoriya, he reached for the boy in concern. What happened? Izuku started with a shiver. Quirk stuff, I'll take that invitation. Well, I actually have 2 plus ones, Toshinori chuckled. Perks of being the #1 hero, I guess. You can ask your mother if she wants to come along, as well. I'll ask, but she doesn't really like fly. The door swung open before he could finish, and the woman herself stepped into the room with narrowed eyes. There you are, she hissed and stormed over to him to grab his ear and drag him out of the room. You know better than to think you can hide from me. It's straight home after school, Mr. Oh, okay, Izuku pleaded. Can you please just take off the ankle monitor? Not until finals are over, she denied. Redistro sighed the long day away at his desk as he finished the last bit of Detnerat paperwork. He was ready and willing to invest in the development of a machine that would automatically file paperwork for the user. He just needed to find a new name for it. According to Trumpet, Paperworkinator wasn't a good name. Grand Commander, Kusari has reached your office as requested, a nasally voice announced through a speaker at his desk. Excellent. Thank you, Skeptic, he replied. Permission to speak freely, sir? Skeptic requested. Of course. Why did you place Getten in charge of so many of the indoctrination centers? You know how he is with his social Darwinism. It's no wonder they were discovered and shut down so soon. I ask myself the same question, Redistro sighed. At least the rest of you are doing fine work in spreading our influence and maintaining our army. Indeed, sir. What do you require of someone of Kusari's rank, if I may ask? I need his touch for an important task, something Getten would be much too heavy-handed for. When a knock came from the other side of the door, Redistro welcomed the new arrival inside and stood behind his desk with an easy smile. The man who casually meandered inside was tall, though not as tall as Redistro, and he was much younger, being in his mid-20s. The lanky man had straight, red hair that hung down to his chin, the bangs of which fell over his face to somewhat obscure his violet eyes that lazily took in his commander. He was wearing a large, dark red leather jacket with a black hood and equally black pants and shoes. Nagato Terami, codename Kusari, Distro smoothly began. One of my most trusted enforcers behind Getten. At your service, Kusari lazily drawled, though he was inwardly perplexed by the grandiose introduction. I have a very crucial mission for you, Distro answered the unasked question, and Kusari's demeanor instantly transformed. His posture straightened, and his eyes focused into the piercing pinpricks the Grand Commander was familiar with. Distro knew better than to be fooled by his subordinate's generally easygoing, laissez-faire attitude. Behind the lackadaisical facade was a sharply analytical mind with an equally deadly quirk to match, as well as the skills to use it with fatal efficiency. His jacket wasn't red purely because he liked the color, after all. The young man silently stood before his leader and awaited the details of his mission, and Distro's smile deepened into a dangerous one. How would you feel about infiltrating the League of Villains? The atmosphere outside of Recovery Girl's office in the evening later that week was tense. Izuku had gone in with Tensei and Recovery Girl to perform the procedure 20 minutes prior, and the assortment of adults and one teenager awaited any updates whatsoever. On one side sat Iida and his parents near the nurse's door, waiting with bated breath for the procedure to end. Across from them were the stressed but hopeful trio of Eraserhead, Present Mike, and Midnight, all there in support of their friend, comrade in arms, and former classmate. Tensei's attempts to put them all at ease by popping several wheelies in his wheelchair and blasting down the hall with his quirk before Izuku arrived helped for a brief moment, but the worry inevitably crept back onto them. Off to the side stood Inko and Principal Nezu, both silent as well in concern for slightly different reasons. Inko was concerned for her son since she knew how energy-intensive fixing significant injuries would be for him. She was glad that Recovery Girl was in there with them to oversee the procedure and monitor the progress of the older Iida's spine while shoveling energy-rich gummies into Izuku as needed. Nezu, meanwhile, was concerned for a myriad of reasons. The procedure on Tensei was chief among them, but he was also thinking about the fallout of Stain's declaration and what it could mean for his students, as well as the moves that the HPSC was starting to make in response. He sincerely hoped that Izuku was successful in healing Tensei's spine for the sake of bringing some amount of good news to the fold. He'd have to figure out a way to explain away Ingenium's miraculous recovery to the press, though. The door to Recovery Girl's office swung open, and everyone's breath hitched. Tensei slowly rolled himself out of the room in his wheelchair with a blank, unreadable expression. He met the eyes of each of the people in attendance and said nothing before closing his eyes and sighing heavily. The mood in the hall became completely crestfallen at the gesture, and his brother clamped down onto the hands of his parents. Then, a sly smirk appeared onto his face before he slowly moved his legs onto the ground and stepped out of his chair and onto his feet to the shock of everyone present. "Ingenium is back, bitches," he cheered. Just like that, the tension was cut through like butter by a hot knife, and he was quickly surrounded by his crying family on all sides. As tactless as ever, elder brother, the youngest Iida present, remarked through his tears. "Well, it seems I'll need a new hero name now that you've taken the actual mantle of Ingenium," Tensei joked to his younger brother. "No," he vehemently shook his head in response. "I cannot accept the title. I'm not yet worthy of bearing that name." "HM? Are you sure?" Tensei questioned. "Yes, I am sure," he emphatically confirmed. "Ingenium symbolizes a true heroic heart and a paragon of justice for all. I have not lived up to that as of yet, so I cannot accept that name. I must carve my own path to being the hero that you believe I can be." Tensei silently considered his words before shrugging in acceptance. The present teachers then stepped forward to greet their friend. "Let me know whatever you decide. Just make sure it's appropriate," Midnight assured the younger Iida brother with a warm smile. As the group gathered and Tensei gave hugs all around, a pale Izuku stumbled out of the room assisted by Recovery Girl, and he fell into the waiting arms of his mother. She softly ran her hand through his hair, and he leaned into her touch with a contented sigh. Damage was a lot worse than I expected, Izuku muttered to his mother. Had Stain been a touch more reckless, Ingenium would be dead. Well, he isn't, Inko assured, and now he can walk again thanks to you. Yeah, I suppose, Izuku yawned, drawing the attention of the Iida family. The barrage of gratitude he received from all four of them zoomed right past him until his friend tearfully clutched his hand between his own. I owe you my life, Midoriya, Tenya choked out. Don't worry about it, Izuku replied before lazily reaching into his pocket and handing him a small slip of paper. Tenya took it and curiously inspected it as the others looked over his shoulder to read what was written, including the teachers with Nezu inexplicably nestled in Aizawa's scarf. You owe me one race, Tensei read and looked to the debatably conscious teenager. And I'll dust both your asses, too, Izuku slurred, receiving 3 sets of snickers from the human educators and a light smack to the head from his mother. That night, a quiet, dimly lit street of a residential area was met with the soft footsteps of a blonde girl in a traditional schoolgirl outfit. Her blushed face was pensive, and in her hand was a grocery bag with a singular item inside. The girl steadily walked toward an alley that she knew very well, and she stopped at the entrance to the dark space between houses. Stainy says you're worthy, she muttered to no one in particular before looking down at the grocery bag for a lengthy moment, and then she tossed the bag into the empty alley. We'll see. Then, practically on a dime, her demeanor flipped and a wide smile took form before she bubbly skipped away into the darkness. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through What If Deku Unleashed God-like Quirk That Surpassed All. I hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did. A big shout-out to DripBayless for crafting such a compelling story. Don't forget to check out their profile on FanfictionNet for more amazing works. The link is in the description below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to What If Deku 2 for more fascinating explorations into the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we're always excited to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you guys in the next video.